Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Past timeline somewhere between 900 and 1000 AD. The start of the new school was a little bit rougher than Salvashar had anticipated. The first hurdle they had to cross was just 2 weeks before the students would come. They had decided that the students should gather at Grim Manor, and that one of them would then come to bring them to the castle. It was a week before one of them had to leave to Grim Manor, when Sal one day entered the Great Hall and saw that the other founders had gathered in front of the teacher's table, talking with each other heatedly. "Did something happen?" Sal asked them when he saw their nervous faces. Rowena grimaced. "We won't have enough servants to help us maintaining the castle and the students," Peveril said. "Even if we relocate every servant of Grim Manor to the castle, it still won't be enough." "Yes, and there is no way that the children can help us in the kitchen like we did it before now," Rowena added. "Their schedule has changed too much to do it, and there are too many mouths to feed to manage the cooking even with their help. And I told you we simply should add some house elves to the castle," Helga said, frowning at her sister-in-law. "It would be the easiest way to gain servants without relocating the ones of Grim Manor." "Do you know how expensive it will be to buy enough house elves for the castle?" Peveril said, frowning at his wife. "We don't have enough money to buy that much, and we definitely don't have enough people to bind them to them. It wouldn't do them any good if we bought them just for them to starve because of the lack of magic they are able to access." Sal frowned when he heard those words. "Starve? I fear I don't understand." Peveril blinked and turned to Sal. "You never had a house elf growing up?" he asked, astonished. Sal shook his head. "Should I have had one?" "Well, it's normal," Rowena said. "Since the Romans brought them with them to Britain, it's normal for a lord to have at least one house elf. And why not? They are useful creatures, and they need another magical being to bind themselves to so that they are able to fully control their own magic. If they don't have a binding, they will slowly go crazy. They literally starve because of the lack of magic that flows through their veins. If they are too long unbound, they will die, so they bind themselves to wizards like us or other purebloods. In return, they serve the one they are bound to." Sal listened interestedly. Until now he had never heard about house elves in the past. Of course he remembered Dobby, but until now he had never thought about how the house elves came to be or why they were serving wizards. "But there is a limit of house elves you can bind to yourself," Godric added. "A pure blood like a vampire or such would be able to bind more to them." To Sal's surprise, he saw Godric grimace when he said the word pure blood. Of course, until now they had just once talked about purebloods, or furbolgs, like Sal called them, but at that time Sal hadn't seen Godric grimace the way he did now. "But a wizard like us is just able to bind 2, maybe 3 house elves to themselves, and that definitely won't be enough to keep the whole castle clean." "And they have to be bound to a wizard?" Sal asked softly. "Where else should they be bound to?" Godric said, sorting. "They need magic to survive. If they don't bind themselves to a wizard, they won't be able to get access to the magic they need." "What about binding them to the wards?" Sol asked, interested. "The wards of the castle are strong. Shouldn't they have enough magic for house elves to be able to bind themselves?" Peveril, Helga, and Godric gawked at him. Rowena frowned. "The castle would have to be sentient for that to be a possibility," she said coolly. "I have never heard about a sentient castle, so there's no way that that is something we could do." To Sal's utter amusement, Rowena stumbled in the next moment forward as if she had been shoved. "What?" she exclaimed, surprised, and whirled around to look at the air behind her. "It seems as if my father has a different opinion," Sal exclaimed, smirking. He knew, of course, that the slight shove Mirrodin's essence had given Rowena was the most it could do, but it was nevertheless funny to see Rowena stumbling forward seemingly without a reason. "Your father?" she repeated with huge eyes, and Sal snorted. "You lived the whole summer in this castle and you never found out it was sentient?" he asked, amused. "Sentient?" This time it was Helga who spoke. "How?" Sal shrugged. "The castle is surrounded by soul wards," he answered. Those wards and the very soul of my father are the reason for the castle's sentient state of mind." "Oh!" This time Rowena's surprise was echoed by the other three. Then Helga's eyes lit up. "So we can bind the house elves to the castle instead of to us?" she asked, interested. Sal shrugged. "I would recommend putting up another layer of blood wards to strengthen the wards, but then yes, we could," he said. So instead of relaxing the last 2 weeks until the end of harvest, Sal and the others warded the castle with blood wards and searched for house elves. It was Helga's idea to simply offer the castle as a sanctuary for the house elves. It worked. As soon as the word was spread, the first house elves appeared and bonded to the castle. At the end of the 2 weeks, the castle had 17 elves, enough so that at least the most important tasks were tended to. Another 3 weeks later, the number of house elves would have doubled. Sometimes, so Sel mused, sometimes Helga had definitely terrifying good ideas. It was the night before one of them had to go to Grim Manor to retrieve the students when they decided to celebrate the beginning of their apprenticeship program in the castle. Godric and surprisingly Peverell had decided that that event had to be celebrated thoroughly and had fetched some fire whiskey from wherever. Sal suspected those two had it brought with them all along, or had bought it when they had left to order furniture or to look after their estates. Anyway, they had it, and they were determined to fill up their wives and Salvasahar. Not that the women minded it at all. Even Sal, who normally didn't drink, was all right with the improper drinking session that night. "You know, we should think of a way to sort the apprentice. You know, the things we fetch tomorrow, we should find a way to swart them when we're gone." Godric slurred. "Yeah," Rowena said. "Somewhat like a talking hat or a changing cloak." "Yeah, right you are. Right you are," Helga exclaimed, giggling. Peverell instead was staring into the flames of the bonfire they had started in the evening, his face severe as if he had been told the reason of life just a moment ago. "We also have to find a way to ensure the apprentices will continue to come after we are dead," he said before he burst into tears. "We will die someday, and then there is no one there anymore to continue our work." Salvo Zahar had to keep in his laughter when he heard Peverell. The man definitely fell out of his normal Sever character when drunk. "Maybe we should go to bed," Sal said, also slurring a little. He wasn't as dead drunk as the others, but he had had his fair share of fire whiskey, and Parseltongue had crept into his voice. "Yeah, bed. Good idea," Godric slurred. "Bed's so soft, warm and so soft." Get bed," Helga snickered. Rowena just giggled, but with Sal's help they all stood. Sal extinguished the flames of the bonfire, and they returned to the castle proper. "You know, we need name for it at the castle," Rowena exclaimed drunkenly. "Can't call it castle all the time after all." Sal just snorted. "Then think of something," he said, before he shoved her and Godric into their rooms. "Bed, you two." After he had done the same to Helga and Peverell, as long as the others were in their rooms, he did not particularly care if they found their way into bed. Sal returned to his own quarters. In there he simply fell onto the bed and without changing fell asleep. The next morning was gruesome, and not only because of his hungover. It was 6 in the morning, just an hour after he finally had entered his quarters, when someone pounded against his door singing, "Go away." The pounding just increased, so Sal finally stood up and went to the door. In front of it stood Rowena next to a sleepy-looking Godric, Peverell and Helga. "I know how we name this castle," she piped up laughing, and then started to sing again. "Horse wards, hoggy warty horse wards, horse wards, hoggy." "Fine," Sal interrupted her, snarling. "We named the academia Hogs Wards. Could we please return to our beds now?" "Sure," Rowena said while smiling brightly, and then entered first his rooms and then his bedchamber. "Coming, love?" "Yay," Godric said, shoved Sal to the side and followed Rowena. Sal gawked at them. "That's my bed. I meant you should return to yours," he cried. Helga just patted him on the head and drew her husband into Sal's quarters and his bedchamber. "Coming, Salvajahar?" she asked. Sal just gawked at her. Then he snorted. "Get them drunk and suddenly they are able to pronounce my name," he exclaimed disbelievingly. Then he followed the others into his bedchamber. When Sal woke up the next time at midday, his head was killing him, but not only that, he found himself lying at the foot part of his bed. In his back were poking some sharp limbs, and a leg was slung over his hip, the foot nearly poking him in the nose. It was a hairy and broad foot, so Sal deduced that it had to be either Godric's or Peveril's foot. He groaned. How by wind and fire had they all ended up in his bed? And then last night caught up with him. I didn't give my go-ahead to name the castle Hogwarts, did I? He asked aloud. He definitely didn't want to believe that he could have been so out of it to agree to a name like Hogwarts. Yes, you did. Rowena's voice was heard somewhere behind him. Sal snorted. And it was your idea, he said coolly. It was, and I still find the name very catching, Rowena answered, sniggering. And because all of you agreed, it counts. We name our, what did you call it? Academia Hogwarts. Yeah, Hogwarts. Academia of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Godric was heard. Sal just sighed. It could be worse, Peveril told him, and a limb stopped poking in his back when he lifted an arm to pat Sal on the shoulder. Sal could not even object to this reasoning. After all, he still remembered the name his castle had in the future. Better Hogwarts than Hogwarts. Not that I am delusional enough to believe that the name won't change in time, he murmured to himself. After all, the castle itself was built above the Black Lake and the river that recharged it, so that it overlooked a great part of the wards included floodplains, which were called Halls by the native people, so Hogwarts was definitely fitting. Not that he thought that they couldn't do better if they tried, but finally he decided that there was nothing he could do about that at 6 in the morning, and instead opted on a little revenge for being woken again an hour after he went to bed. You know that someone has to go today to fetch our apprentices at Grim Manor, he said. Then he smirked. And I promise you I won't be it. The answers were 4 loud groans and moans about headaches. Sal smirked. Yep, revenge was sweet. Godric finally was the one who brought the students to their new home in Picture. He had left 2 weeks ago and finally returned together with their new and old students. They all looked at the castle in wonder after they had crossed the lake with boats. Sal had insisted on it. He had talked with his father and they had decided to welcome a student and to add them to the inhabitants of the castle. They would have to cross the lake. Like that, it would be easier for the essence of Merlin to recognize friend and foe. And of course the first view of the castle was even more impressive if you stared at it from the lake. When Godric entered the castle with the students, Sal saw that his friend was carrying a new sword at his hip, a sword that looked oddly familiar to Sal. Sal blinked, but finally decided to say nothing for now. Instead, he concentrated on using legerdemaincy to sort the students in their new houses. The most of the older ones he did not have to look. He knew where they would fit in. But the younger ones he sorted with his skills. It was tiring and he soon wished for the sorting hat just to escape his fate as the sorting hat. After the ceremony he had a headache. Still, he kept quiet about it. Instead, he welcomed his students back, told them the new and old rules, and after that left them alone in their common room for the first time ever to return to the teacher's conference room. Or what would be the teacher's conference room later on. How was your trip? Helga asked Godric as soon as all 5 adults were present in the room. Pleasant, Godric answered and pulled out the sword he was carrying. I also had time to go to the goblins to ask for a new sword. They sold me this one. Sal stared at the sword. It was his. Excalibur, just that there were suddenly letters etched in the blade. Godric Gryffindor, it proclaimed proudly. Fury rose in Sal's stomach. Sold? He asked softly. Yes, Godric answered proudly while he caressed the hilt of his sword. The goblin Garnag sold it to me for a very good price. He even engraved it when I asked him to do it. Sold, Sal repeated, his voice suddenly deadly. Godric stopped caressing his sword and stared at Salazar. Salazar? He asked hesitatingly. He sold you this sword, Sal said, his eyes blasting. Then he turned. I have to go. I have to gut a goblin tonight. It was Peveril who stopped him by grabbing his arm. Salazar, what happened? He asked, astonished and uncomprehending. Helga and Godric looked at him with huge eyes, and Rowena had hers narrowed in thought. Betrayal, Sal answered. That's what happened. Betrayal? How? Godric asked, confused. I just bought a good sword. That has nothing to do with betrayal. As an answer, Sal returned to the table and the others who were standing around it. Then he strode on until he reached Godric and ripped the sword harshly out of Godric's hand. He turned it and showed the phoenix and basilisk engraving on the hilt to Godric. Look at this, he hissed, Parseltongue playing with his normal speech. These are the symbols of Morganath, the clan leader of Lefay, your head of house, in the eyes of the goblin nation. Godric blinked and then took the sword from Sal and softly caressed the tiny figures. I still do not understand. This is the sword of a clan leader, Sal answered with fury in his eyes. It is holy in the eyes of the goblins. Only the clan leader and his direct heirs or ancestors are allowed to use it. You, Godric, are an heir. You have the right to use it. That you had to pay to get it is an insult to the clan of Morganath. Godric's eyes widened when he heard that. But, he stuttered, but Sal was not finished. A goblin that is able to spit on something holy like that spits on the goblin nation itself, and all its dealings within the nation, and between the goblins and other races. I cannot let this be. This goblin insulted you. It insulted its king, and it insulted everyone that ever fell by the blade of that sword or held this sword in his hands. I will not let it tarnish my brother's and father's legacy. And with that he wrested himself free of Peveril's grasp, took the sword, buckled it and hurried out of the room, still fuming with his fury. Behind him he could hear the hurried steps of Rowena running after him. How? She cried loudly. How is Merlin involved in all this? So she finally had remembered. Sal stopped dead and turned back to her. Behind her stood Godric, Peveril and Helga, all of them with confusion on their faces. What are you talking about? Sal asked harshly. Rowena snorted. Do not lie to me, Salazar Emrys, son of Merlin Emrys, she said. I am not an idiot. It took some time, but I know whose son you are, even if I don't know how you are still alive after all this time. The others stared at him when they heard Rowena's exclamation. Then they turned to Sal. That's Rowena is wrong, isn't she? Godric stuttered. Sal scowled, but he ignored Godric and answered Rowena icily. Of course he could have denied it and tried to wiggle out of Rowena's accusing words, but he was riled up with fury and all he wanted to do was to go to Londinium and kill a goblin. Sal might have never been a true goblin, but he had lived long enough with them to act like them if he worked with them, and now his goblin raising was taking over. This has nothing to do with my birth, father, he said clearly, but coolly to Rowena. This is about the man who adopted me because I was a son of his line from my mother's side, and he wanted an heir. This is about my brother. It had nothing to do with this sword. But I will not watch when my brother's and adopted father's names are tarnished. He turned away again just to be stopped by Helga this time. Adopted father? She asked. Sal didn't react. Salazar! The doors in front of Sal were blown close by a strong gust of wind. Rona had drawn her wand and used a spell to close the doors. The resulting bang brought Sal out of his fury-induced stupor. He stopped mid-step. Salazar, Helga repeated. What did you mean with adopted father? Sal stared at her, then he sighed and warily rubbed his forehead. Godric and you are the descendant of my younger brother Medred, he finally answered. So when you are talking about your father, you meant Arthur Pendragon? Peveril asked, half astonished, half flabbergasted. Yes, Sal answered curtly. And now let it be. I still don't understand why you are the one who wants to gut the goblin, Godric said. Given you are my ancestor's brother and as such, you also have been insulted, but shouldn't I be the one who goes to gut the goblin? I mean, it was my family heirloom they sold to me. And it was my sword they sold, Sal countered. To the goblin I am known as Morganad. I am your clan leader in the goblin nation, and as such, I will go there tonight and get revenge. Oh, silence, then Godric spoke again. Well, then I definitely won't stop you. You wouldn't have stopped me even if you wanted, Sal countered, banged open the door and left. The others watched him go, still reeling with what they had learned tonight. Ragnuk I, king of the Goblin, was in the middle of working on his paperwork. He hated paperwork, but he still had to do it. And he had done it the whole morning until now. After working hours and hours on his paperwork, he had started to wish anyone to interrupt him. Well, at least he wished for it until suddenly the iron taste of fury coursed through his mouth, followed by the icy fire of a clan leader that rippled through his veins. Ragnuk shuddered. As the king of the goblins, he could feel all clan leaders and their feelings as soon as they came near him. Normally a clan leader had enough control on his emotions to not disturb the Goblin King, and the taste of old blood on Ragnuk's tongue told him that the furious clan leader was definitely old enough to be able to shut the Goblin King out, unless he was furious enough not to care or wanted to warn the king. This time it was both. Ragnuk understood the next moment when his doors were blasted open and in marched a cold-eyed human-looking clan leader. Ragnuk never had seen this man before, but the magic of the clan leader felt familiar, so Ragnuk definitely had met this man before. And a man it was, even if it definitely wasn't a human. Clan leader Ragnuk finally greeted the fuming man softly. The man said nothing. Instead, he took out a sword and threw it on the desk before Ragnuk. The Goblin King stared at the sword and softly held his hand over the hilt without touching it. To touch the sword of a clan leader without his consent was an insult no goblin would even think about. He knew the sword. Every Goblin King recognized the sword of every clan. The clan of Morgannat, a clan of old ones. The clan had a high standing in the Goblin nation. Its leader was a powerful healer, not someone you wanted to cross at all. He looked up at the cold-eyed human-looking man in front of his desk. The clan leader of Morgannat himself. "Take it, my king," Morgannat hissed, fury still tinging his voice. Ragnuk raised his eyebrow but followed the demand of the clan leader, a clan leader that was not really his subject but still belonged to the Goblin nation. To be called my king by a free clan leader like Morgannat showed him that whatever happened was something grave. He hesitatingly touched the sword. The sword was filled with the fury of its wielder but also of the feeling of betrayal. Betrayal by one of them. "What happened?" Ragnuk asked sharply. "The child of my brother had to pay to be allowed to wield my sword." Morgannat hissed furiously. He was told that the sword was made for him. "Pull it out." Ragnuk knew better than not give in to a demand of a furious and betrayed clan leader. He pulled out the sword. When he saw the blade he hissed. "Who?" he asked, furious himself. "Now, the child told me, Garnig." Morgannat replied. "I want to see him when I withdraw my aid to him. I want to see his eyes when he understands how he has wronged me." Ragnuk gulped. He knew that a healer normally did not fight, but taking on the fury of a healer was the most stupid thing you could do. A healer did not fight. A healer simply stopped to recognize you as one of his subjects. "Sentinel?" Ragnuk cried, and two of his guardians entered the room. "Your Majesty," one of them said, eyeing Morgannat nervously. Ragnuk knew they could feel Morgannat's status in the magic surrounding the Old One. "I want Garnig in here now." "Yes, Your Highness," the other one answered. A few minutes later, Garnig entered the room. "Your Highness," he greeted, bowing to Ragnuk without even looking at the clan leader next to the king. "Explain," the king said, taking up the sword and showing it to Garnig. Garnig sneered. "The human asked me for a sword and this one appeared. I thought it prudent to make some money with a fool like him." Again the fury of Morgannat tasted like iron on the king's tongue, iron and blood. "You dared to befoul the sword of a clan leader with your greed," Morgannat hissed. "You dared my wrath to gain money that belongs to my clan, a clan of the Goblin nation." Garnig looked up sneering, but the sneer vanished when he suddenly was met with the familiar power of a Goblin clan leader. His eyes widened. "Good clan leader," he stuttered, shivering under the death glare of the man in front of him. The answer was a cruel smile, a smile Garnig recognized as a death sentence, even in the human-looking face of the other. I would never dare to befoul a clan of the Goblin nation," Garnig insisted. You cannot be part of a clan." The green eyes now shone with death, and behind their depths, hell was burning. Garnag shivered and turned to the king with pleading eyes. The king looked away and dread settled in Garnag's stomach, and then the human-looking clan leader spoke again. "No," he hissed, his voice marred with the soft hisses of a snake. "Not a clan? Not a clan?" he whispered, and Garnag shivered when the soft hisses of parcel-tongue-filled words caressed his ears. "You tried to trick my heir, you sold my sword, and now dared to insult me even more by telling me it was all for the money that belonged to a clan, my clan, long before you were even born. You disgust me." There the clan leader stopped, and Garnag suddenly was very aware of the sword blade that caressed his cheek without hurting him. He eyed it warily. But even with his eyes on the sword, he was not prepared for the knife that came out of nowhere and marred his face with the symbol of a traitor. Garnag's eyes shot up and met with the eyes of Morgannat. Said clan leader sneered at him. "I do not want to see you again. You, Garnag the Greedy, are no subject of mine. You will be less than dirt beneath my feet from now on. You will be marred with your shame so that no one will ever dare to even look at you again. You will suffer until you die. And die you will. Pray that it will be soon, because if it isn't, you will suffer endlessly from my curse until you die." With that, Morgannat shed his sword and knife and left the room. Garnag sighed. He had feared the wrath of the clan leader, but now he was content, so he turned to his king again and sneered. "This human has no idea how to be a clan leader," he said, sneering. "I cannot fathom how he even got to be one. I know, my king, that you would be wiser then to make a human like him a clan leader." But Ragnuk just shook his head, sighing. "You have no idea what he has done to you, Garnag," the king said. "Morgannat is one of the oldest, or maybe even our oldest clan leader. You do not cross him. Never." "Why?" "Because he mares your face with the symbol of a traitor." Garnag sneered. "I might have lost my honor with this symbol, but there is far worse than being marred as a traitor." "There is, and you have been given the worst fate," the king replied, and shuddered. "I remember him saving my life when I was a child, and I remember the words my father spoke when he heard the fate of my attackers. Just ask for my sword when I have wronged you. I will give it to you freely so that you can stab me." "It will definitely preferable to this punishment," he said, and he was definitely right. "I would prefer to be killed with my own sword than to die your death." Now dread settled in Garnag's stomach. "My death?" he asked hesitatingly. "He didn't do anything." "You are wrong. He cursed you with the most dreaded curse his kind can come up," the king retorted. "Morgannat has revoked your right for a healer. No goblin healer would go against the words of Morgannat. They all will follow a fellow healer long before thinking about kinship to you." Garnag paled. "A healer?" he whispered. "No, Garnag," Ragnuk answered. "The healer. Morgannat was the healer in charge of the Battle of the Great North Fields. He's one of our best to act against him, and his heir was a serious mistake in your life." Garnag paled even more, and his fingers ran along the bloody mark on his face. The king sent him a grimaced smile. "Now you understand, don't you? He killed you as soon as he had marred your face, because no one would go against a healer's wrath. And even if Garnag would be able to heal the injury on his own, from now on he would just be able to pray, because whatever happened, no healer, no potion master, and no one with even the tiniest bit of healing knowledge would ever look at him again." Garnag shuddered when he understood his fate. "My king," he started. "No, Garnag," the king said, "I will not change your duties to aid you after what you have done. I am the king. I do not go against the judgment of my clan leaders." With that, Ragnuk dismissed Garnag and returned to his paperwork. He definitely had enough action for one day. When Saul returned to the castle, the others were waiting for him. Saul just shed his traveling clothes and returned his sword to Godric. "Here, take it," he said. Godric blinked and stared at the sword. "It is yours, Salazar," he finally said. Saul just snorted. "I left it at Gringotts for the heirs of my brother if they needed it. I do not mind if you carry it." "You're all right." Godric hesitatingly took the sword. "Thank you." Saul just nodded and left the hall again. He had been gone long enough. He had to look out for his Slytherins, even if he might be a week late to do so. The first class in the dungeon room he had chosen as a potion classroom was odd again, especially because it was in the middle of the first class that Sal suddenly realized he had chosen his old potion classroom, the one Professor Snape had lectured in. The rest of the class he pondered if it had been by chance that it was the same one or if it had been his own experience that let him choose this room as the classroom in the first place. He snorted inwardly when he thought about it. I bet Snape used that classroom because it was always used, he pondered, under his breath. Funnily, I'm sure I wouldn't have used it if Snape hadn't. The snort that wanted to escape was just in time suppressed. It was later that day when he heard two newly named Gryffindor talking. Not that you could see that they were Gryffindor. There was nothing that proclaimed their houses, yet at least he wouldn't even have bothered listening if he hadn't heard the words fathers decided to forbid purebloods to enter our realm. Purebloods? Furbolg? But why would a wizard forbid a furbolg to enter his realm? Sal could not remember any time in the past where wizards were biased against firbolg. Well, except for the goblins. Somehow these always seemed to rub the wizards the wrong way, whatever why. Why did he do that? The other one said, confused. Because they are dangerous, the other one replied. Think about it. If they aren't allowed to enter, your father wouldn't have been bitten by the werewolf. For a moment Sal thought about intercepting in their discussion, but then he let it be. It would change nothing if he talked to the children. He had to talk to the lords. Still, he would look out for discussions like that in the future. Life went on. Within the next month, the children adapted to their new home and the odd quirks it had gotten, thanks to Rowena, Helga, and Godric. Finally, it was Samhain, or what later would be Halloween. If they still would have lived in Grim Manor, Sal would have left the manor 3 days prior to find a secluded place and prepare for the coming feast. But this time it was different. This time Sal had students he alone was responsible for, so he had to stay near. You're not leaving? Rowena asked him a day before Samhain night. I can't, Sal answered sincerely. I cannot leave the children without an adult around. You have done it before after harvest, Rowena pointed out with a raised eyebrow. And you all chastised me for it, Sal answered. So, you'll feast with us? Rowena asked, but Sal shook his head. Sal sighed. Of course he had heard of the feasts they had on Samhain. It was tradition to stay inside for the night and feast, but Sal had not grown up in the same time like the others. I do not celebrate Samhain like you do, he said softly. I won't celebrate it with you. Rowena looked at him surprised. You do not celebrate like us. So, how do you? It's the Day of the Dead, Rowena, Sal answered sincerely. Don't ask me to feast on a day like that. Rowena frowned but let him go. So the next day, while the others were feasting in the great hall, Sal entered the Chamber of Secrets and in it his ritual chamber. He had planned for this day since midsummer. The first thing he did was to draw runes on the floor of the chamber. Then he added some different potions on crucial points and some earth on others. At the end he put down some knives in the middle of the circle and stepped out of the ritual room to do a ritual washing and then return. When he was done with that, he sat down in the middle of the runic circle, naked like the day he was born, and started to picture the runes he wanted to add to his blood magic in his mind. He closed his eyes and the first wickedly sharp knife in front of him was lifted in the air with his magic. One moment it hesitated in front of him while he braced himself, but then it cut for the first time that night. While wielding the knives with his magic, Sal lost totally track of time. He lost sense of his own body and mind. The only thing that existed were the runes, the skin and the knives that added the tiny runes to the skin. Blood magic. One of the most forbidden magics for nearly 1,000 years, since the day the Romans had killed Arthur and the most of the druids on the Isles. Sal did not care that it was outlawed. Ever since the day he had finalized his awakening, Sal had used Samhain, Embolc, Beltane, and Lognasad to add to his blood magic. Blood magic, like he practiced, was used to strengthen body, mind, soul, and magic. There was no way to increase your magic by practicing blood magic, but with time you had better access to your magic and your endurance to use magic increased. The same was said for body, mind, and soul. You could not overcome your natural limits, but with blood magic you were able to reach them. Using blood magic for the body normally increased your life, an aspect Sal was not really interested in because he would live another 1,000 years if he used blood magic or not. Using blood magic for the soul wakened your ancestry and increased your connection to the abilities you had inherited, be they magical, creature or mundane. Using blood magic for the mind increased your memory, something Sal really didn't need but did anyway, because it was a part of using blood magic and aided you against foreign magic and intrusion of the mind. Simply said, it was another aid for those who thought our clemency was not safe enough, and legilimency not subtle enough. Sal always had thought both. Using blood magic for the magic instead was tricky. Every ritual to aid the flow of the magic through the body had to be planned carefully. Not that the other blood magics weren't dangerous, but doing blood magic for your magic was not only dangerous, but the power rush you felt afterwards, not that you had more magic afterwards, it was just flowing better. Simply was addicting. Sela had heard of thousands of druids who had given in to the feeling and had died an extremely painful death, just a few days later. If you gave in, your magic would react to it and it would not stop to rush through your body anymore. Magic like that would burn you inside out in the end, a slow and extremely painful death. And it was a blood ritual like that Sal was doing tonight. He always used Samain for blood magic for his magic. The connection to the dead on that night aided him in grounding himself and not losing himself in the feeling of his magic. Blood rituals were done at least every second year. They had to be done regularly, otherwise Sal would slowly use the connection to his blood magic, and the results could be disastrous. Every experience, every loss, and everything else important had to be added in another runic chain to his body. Sometimes he just had to add 1 or 2 runes to an existing circle. Other times he had to draw a fully fledged new one. It was his magic that told him what to do, and he complied. Sal was thoroughly. Every year on Samin he would add runes to do with his magic, on Imbolc runes to do with his soul, on Beltane runes to do with his mind, and on Lognasad runes to do with his body. Simply said, his blood magic was like a complicated diary of his life. The last knife softly landed back on the floor. Sal inhaled deeply. Then he opened his eyes and inspected his wounds. Newly engraved runes were covering his entire left shoulder, his right hip and his left inner thigh, mingling with the other runic circles that were glowing slightly beneath his skin. The runes were bloody and red blood was slowly oozing out of the cuts and running down his back. They seemed to follow the runes Sal had seen in his mind to the Turt. Sal sighed, then he softly destroyed the runic circle in front of him. Pain shot through his left shoulder, thigh, and his right hip, followed by the addicting feeling of power. He was drowning in power. He was powerful. He could do everything he wanted to, even if others would object, because he was more powerful than they were. Salvar-Sahar gasped and tried to suppress the feelings, knowing exactly what would happen if he wouldn't be able to. For at least 10 minutes he rang with his magic, then the feelings slowly vanished until only Sal was left behind. He was tired. His body ached even after the runes had sunk under his skin and bonded with the other runes. He was covered in blood and was shaking with exhaustion. On the way back to his rooms in the dungeons, Sal was going slowly. His body ached terribly. Not that he hadn't expected it. It was a normal occurrence after using blood magic on his magic. Fighting back the feeling of power always was extremely strenuous. "By Merlin, Salazar, what happened?" Sala flinched and turned around to face whoever had found him on the way back to his rooms. It was Godric. "So the feast ended, huh?" Sal said softly, knowing that Godric always was the last to leave a feast. No," Godric said, sounding oddly sober for coming from a feast. Normally Godric was the first to get drunk. Sal raised an eyebrow. "You're strange today, Godric," he concluded. "You're out here and the feast is still on, and you are sober." Godric snorted. "No, I'm definitely not sober," he said. "And I'm out here because, well," he hesitatingly showed off his right hand which had, until now, been hidden behind his back. In it was a hat which looked as if it had a face. The hat. Sal nearly whooped with joy when he recognized the sorting hat in Godric's hands. Of course he wouldn't show his joy. After all, he hadn't told the others how headache inducting the sorting of the students had been. "So, you're out here because of a hat," he said, instead sarcastically. "A simple, odd-looking hat." Something like that," Godric said, still eyeing Sal nervously as if he thought Sal would faint every moment. Salazar could not even fault him. He definitely felt tired enough to lose conscience right here, right now. "Something like that?" Sal repeated while he tried to ignore his shaking legs. Well, you see, Godric stuttered, then he straightened up. "I somehow enchanted it. I don't know how, but, well, when it started to talk and didn't stop anymore. Rowena was furious and drenched me in ice water to sober me up before throwing me out of the hall until I find a way to end the enchantment on my head." "Godric, I know you're drunk, but even you should be able to hear that the hat doesn't talk," Sal said, eyeing the silent hat confused. Of course he knew the hat would learn to talk eventually, but right now it definitely didn't. "Yes, well, stunning spell, you know," Godric said, embarrassed. "I told you it wouldn't shut up before." "Ah, well, all right, have fun," Sal said and turned around again to continue his way down the dungeons. "Wait, Salazar," Godric said, and one of his hands came down on Sal's shoulder. Sal flinched again, this time violently. It was just his luck that Godric had to choose his left shoulder. "Shite, Salazar!" Godric let go of the hat, and before Sal could stop his friend, his tunic was ripped open and his left shoulder exposed. It still was drenched in blood, and the skin was of an angry red. The wounds itself had closed, but blue and green bruises were littering the angry red skin where once had been open wounds, and Sal had not wiped away the blood from the cuts. His shoulder looked like it had taken a front seat of a battle mage's target practice. Sal winced just by looking at it. Godric let out a horrified gasp. "Salazar, what by Merlin and Morgana were you doing tonight?" Sal looked at Godric warily. He had never told the others of his blood magic, because he knew what the sorcerers of these times were thinking about it. "Salazar? I don't think you should know, Godric," Sal said while his mind played over and over Hermione's voice talking about Salazar Slytherin being cast out of Hogwarts. Godric scrutinized Sal's shoulder. Then he frowned. "I think I should know," he said. "Whatever happened, your shoulder looks horrible." As if to emphasize his words, Godric prodded Sal's shoulder. Sal hissed in pain. "Godric." "Don't Godric me, Sal," Godric said. "I have to know how hurt your shoulder is." "It's not too badly hurt," Sal said and tried to escape Godric's fingers. "Believe me, I know." "Salazar, don't you dare to talk around the bush." Salazar hesitated another moment, but when he looked at Godric he understood that his friend wouldn't give up until Sal told him the truth. He sighed. "It was a ritual," he said sincerely. Godric frowned. "A ritual," he repeated. His voice wasn't damning Sal, so Sal scraped together his courage and defined it even more. "Blood magic," he said, and Godric sucked in the air, staring at Sal with unsure eyes. "Blood magic?" he asked. And this time Sal heard the accusation in Godric's voice. For a moment Sal had the inexplicable urge to apologize to his friend, but then he straightened his shoulders and looked his friend directly in the eye. "Yes, blood magic, Godric. The same blood magic I have been raised with." Godric gawked at him.
"Raise?
"You're telling me that your father, Medin, raised you to use blood magic?" Sal sighed. "Godric," he finally said, while he searched for the wall to lean against it when his legs started to feel like pudding. "Do you know when I was born?" Godric blinked, then he slowly shook his head. "You never told." "I was born over 1,000 years ago, Godric," Sal said truthfully. "When I was raised there were no wands, rituals, runes, potions, and blood magic. Those were the magic I was raised with. I might have started to use a wand like you do, but I am still a druid. I won't quit using the magic I was raised with, just because you started to call them dark." Godric bit his lips and Sal sighed. "Please, Godric, just tell me if you can't accept it. I would prefer to know before you try to kill me for being dark." Sal knew he would leave if Godric could not accept him like he was. He did not want to destroy the school by fighting with the founder of Gryffindor House. Salazar, Godric finally said hesitatingly. Do you teach blood magic to our apprentices? No, Sal shook his head. I would have told you if I did. I might ask the others in a few years' time to add some blood magic rituals for the protection of the students against the dark arts, but I did not teach any of them any kind of blood magic until now. Godric scrutinized him again, then he nodded. Let's get you back to your rooms, he said. Sal stared at him. That's it? I say no, and your sole answer is, let's get you back to your rooms. Godric shrugged. What else should I say, he said. I think I know you, Salazar. You never lied to us before, so if you tell me you don't teach blood magic to our apprentices, I believe you. That doesn't mean I simply will accept that you practice it, but that discussion can be postponed at least until we reach your chambers. Salazar eyed his friend wary, but then he nodded. All right, he said, and slowly let go of the wall. His legs definitely were shaking now, and he wasn't sure if he would be able to reach his rooms before he collapsed. Let me help you, Godric said, and made a motion as if he wanted to start supporting Sal. Don't forget your speaking hat, Sal commented dryly. Godric just chuckled, picked up his head and again reached for Sal. This time Sal let him. With Godric's support, Sal was in his rooms just a few minutes later. His legs and hands were still shaky, but when Godric sat him down on a chair and tried to pull off Sal's ruined shirt, Sal stopped him. I'll do that myself, he said. Thanks. But instead of leaving, Godric just stepped back a step or two. Do you intend to stay here to watch me strip? Sal sneered. The answer was a delicately raised eyebrow. Do you intend to sleep on the ground if you fall and are unable to get up again tonight? The Gryffindor founder countered. Sal just snorted. It's not the first time that I used blood magic, he said. I'm definitely able to look after me without you hovering in the background. So you are, Godric said, uncaring, still planted on the same spot. For a moment Sal scrutinized him angrily, but then he just sighed and striped with caution, first out of his ruined shirt, after that out of his trousers. He felt, more than saw, Godric's eyes traveling over his body, taking in every scar and every blood-covered bruise he could see from his position. It was a clinical glance, there to assess the damage done to Sal. But Sal could see a short flickering of horror crossing Godric's features when he saw the scars, especially the one scar Sal had gotten the day he died for Camelot. Then his friend turned his eyes away and instead busied himself by magically calling a bowl and filling it with water. He heated the water and conjured up some cloths. Let me at least help you to clean away the blood, he said. Sal eyed the water nervously. It's just water, isn't it? He asked, and Godric nodded. For a moment he hesitated, but then he inclined his head to give Godric the go-ahead. The other founder smiled, then he sat down, the bowl on a table next to Sal's chair, gave a conjured cloth to Salazar, and circled Sal to have a better look at Sal's backside. When Godric started to clean away the blood that had from the shoulder flown down Sal's back, he started to talk again. The scar on your chest, Godric said hesitatingly, but still too curious not to ask his friend. Shouldn't you be dead? I mean, it looks fatal, you know. Salazar just snorted. Is there a reason, you ask, or is it simply curiosity?
Well...
Sal laughed softly when he heard his friend stutter embarrassedly. Curiosity it is, he remarked, still silently laughing when his friend failed to answer. Well, it looks awful. Godric tried to defend himself. You can't expect me not to ask. Sal turned his head and raised an eyebrow. And I thought you would try to assess if I am a danger to the apprentices and not if there are some war stories I'd be able to tell you. War stories? Godric asked, interested. You were in a war? Sal shrugged, just to hiss when his shoulder protested the movement. Several, he answered finally. I'm a healer, Godric. Believe me, as a healer you'll end up on the battlefield if there is a war. The answer was a thoughtful look. I forgot that you are a fully trained healer, the Gryffindor founder said. This time Sal turned and looked at his friend in disbelief. You're telling me that you forgot that I'm a healer after I practically called you back from the dead? He asked, astonished. How by wind and fire did you manage to forget that you nearly died when we met? Well, I didn't die, did I? Godric answered, shrugging. And it was years ago. Then he stopped and looked Sal over again. Not that I could tell that it was years ago by looking at you. Sal blinked, uncomprehending. Why? He asked. This time it was Godric who looked at him with disbelief. Maybe because you haven't aged a day since we met, he said sarcastically. Sal just raised an eyebrow. Pot, kettle, Godric. Well, I am a Lefay, Godric said, as if this was the only explanation needed. And? Sal said. And we Lefays age more slowly than other wizards, Godric concluded, and rolled with his eyes as if it was obvious to everyone but Sal. And what about Rowena and Peveril? Sal asked. Something to do with their parents, Godric said. I never truly asked. I just know that their parents were odd and that they left Rowena and Peveril to fight by themselves when they were just 20 years of age. Sal had suspected that the parents of those two had been fibbled, but until now he had had no evidence. That the parents left them when they turned 20, however, was definitely supporting Sal's suspicion. 30 years were the longest a fibbled was able to change to human form. And that form for so long was a one-time deal. So it was no surprise that Rowena and Peveril's parents departed after those two were 20. Their parents would have to go if they had been human for 10 years when they met. But you, Sal, shouldn't you have aged since we met? Godric asked him in that moment and brought him back from his thoughts with that question. Sal blinked, disoriented, then he snorted. Have you forgotten who I am, Godric? He asked, with disbelief in his voice. Godric looked at him confused. Godric, Sal said patiently. I am Midden Embris's son. I am Arthur Pendragon's adopted son and adopted brother to Medred Lefay, your ancestor. Did it never occur to you that that makes me a lot older than you are? Oh, Godric said, staring down at Sal. But how are you able to live so long? I mean, shouldn't you be dead now? Sal just snorted and pointed at his chest and the deadly-looking scar on it. I have a little problem with dying, Godric, Sal said. Add to that my parents were Firabolgs, and you have the explanation why I am still alive. Godric looked at him thoughtfully. Oh, all right, he finally said. Then he hesitated another moment before he again gave in to his curiosity. Did your father really teach you blood magic? I mean, blood magic is part of the dark arts, and your father Merlin is known as a very light wizard. Sal just snorted. The meaning of light and dark has changed over time, Godric, he explained. The time I grew up in, it was normal to do blood magic. Rituals and potions were the most often used arts of magic. For us, blood magic wasn't evil. It just was a way to gain control over your gift. But it's seen as evil now, so why didn't you stop? Because I can't, Sal answered sincerely. Godric gawked at him. What do you mean you can't? Sal sighed. Blood magic can be deadly if you... He stopped, not content with his sentence. There are rituals and rituals, Godric, he started again. The first rituals a druid does are those to shield their body from the following rituals. After that comes the blood wakening. If you wouldn't do the blood wakening, you could stop after shielding yourself from other rituals. But after the blood wakening, you have to keep doing blood magic. If you wouldn't, you would lose the grip on your magic, and finally on your mind. It wouldn't do you any good if you stopped. Oh, Godric said, his eyes wide. So you have to do it. You would go crazy if you didn't, right? Yes, Sal said, then he shrugged. But there is always a setback in every kind of magic you practice. I don't know a setback in my kind of magic, Godric snorted. Sal just raised an eyebrow. Let me break your wand and we'll talk again, he countered. If you would do that, I wouldn't be able to use magic. Oh, yes. Oh, Sal just shook his head at his friend. Like I told you, every magic has a setback. You don't have enough control without your wand. I have to do blood magic every other year to keep a grip on my magic. So you can't help it, Godric concluded. Sal shrugged. Of course he could do blood magic less often, but in the end Godric was right. He wouldn't be able to end it. And you won't teach it to our apprentices? Sal sighed. I was thinking about teaching them the protections, he said hesitatingly. Godric frowned. Why? because you told me about the texts that still exist. I don't want them to go insane just because they decided to play with the instructions in the texts. And there will be some that will do it even if they are warned. Don't delude yourself in thinking they won't. Godric frowned at that, but then he nodded. You're right, he said. But if you truly do it, please speak to the others beforehand. Sal just nodded. He was surprised that Godric didn't object his plans, but he also was glad the other didn't, like that he might not to go behind the others back to shield his students. So, I'm done, Godric said in that moment and vanished the bloody cloth he had used to wipe the blood off Sal's back. Thank you. Godric just nodded and turned away while Sal put on his clothes again. When Godric turned back to him, he had the talking and silenced hat in his hands. Another question, Salazar, he said hesitatingly. Would you mind to help me with that thing? Sal just laughed. Well, I definitely have an idea what to do with it, he answered. Give it to me. When he later that day, it was after midnight after all, showed off his idea to the other founders and told them to embed some of their personality traits in the enchanted sarcastic hat, they looked at him oddly. At least they did until he told them he planned to use it to sort. Good riddance was the only thing Peveril said when he heard about Sal's idea, and was promptly promoted to house the hat for the rest of the year. Like that, the sorting hat started to inhabit Peveril's office. The real problem started 3 years later when Sal finally decided to push through his plans for the girls. The gathering of the lords was loud as ever. But this time, instead of vital matters, they were discussing rumors. I heard that there's an immortal pureblood running through the country and hunting sorcerers and sorceresses, Lord Gaunt said. We should discuss what we will do to stop him from entering the Isles. I don't care if he wreaks havoc somewhere on the mainland, but not here under our reign. Are you truly sure it's an immortal pureblood? Peveril asked with a raised eyebrow. Lord Gaunt just sneered. I heard that he was beheaded. 3 days later he returned and killed his murderers. Lord Gaunt replied hauntingly. Peveril snorted. There is no pure blood that could survive something like that, he countered. Obviously there is. Lord Gaunt sneered. And obviously we need to somehow keep our people safe. If there is truly a pure blood that can survive that, then we must find a way to keep us safe from it. There is no pure blood in the world that could do something like that, not without the aid of dark magic, Peveril objected. As if there is a way to get immortal with dark magic, another lord called in. In the next moments, others voiced that they thought him right. There is, Sal's soft voice finally interrupted the others. Everyone fell silent when he spoke. You sound sure of that, Lord Selwyn said with a raised eyebrow. Sal just shrugged. I heard about the possibility before, he said. It's a vile way to gain immortality, but it's a way nonetheless. Lord Gaunt just sneered. I think you are a little bit too young to fully understand what you are talking about. Believe me when I tell you that there is no way to gain immortality. Sal opened his mouth to object, but Lord McGonagall was faster. He's right, lad, he said. There definitely is no way to gain something like immortality by dark magic. Yes, there are just pure bloods and their unnatural abilities, another one said. I bet there is a pure blood somewhere whose ability is to be immortal, and said pure blood is now killing people on the mainland. I told you that there is no pure blood that can survive. Oh, stop it, Peveril. We all know you think yourself an expert on purebloods, but there are things that even you don't know. For those I have my sister, Peveril snapped. This time some chuckles could be heard from various directions. Well, I at least did not hesitate and banned the purebloods from my lands, another lord called in. Even if the beast isn't immortal, that it's still alive tells you that we should keep everything unnatural away from us. And purebloods are unnatural. Sal sneered, but a lot of other lords nodded reluctantly. Lord Selwyn sighed. For a moment there was a lull in the conversation, then the lord from before decided to go formal with his proclamation. Well, I propose we should vote if we ban purebloods from all our lands, or if it's the individual lord's decision. The lord who had banned the purebloods from his land said. The second lord seconded. Lord Gaunt and Lord Selwyn frowned, but Lord Selwyn nevertheless called out a vote. Sal was shocked when he saw lords voting for the ban. It were not enough for a law, but too many nonetheless, or so Sal thought. The proposition was turned down, Lord Selwyn said. We should stop discussing rumours and voting on them. Instead, we should finally return to more important matters. From then on, the meeting turned to the usual themes, like trading, the state of the crops, the division of the lands, one or two marriage proposals that were important for all lords, and finally Hogwarts. It was then, listening to Lord Gaunt's praise for their academia, when Sal finally struck. I thank you for your kind words, Lord Gaunt, he said smoothly after the Lord had finished his praise for Hogwarts and its apprentices. We all appreciate them very much, but not all things are running as smoothly as they should at our academia, and I am sorry that I have to darken this meeting by proposing something that is very important to me, but also very hard to accomplish. But the truth is that my plea would help our academia immensely if you accept my motion. Don't worry, Lord Slytherin, Lord McGonagall said. Propose your idea to us, and we will see if we are able to grant you your wish. Sal nodded and stood. It had been 2 years ago when they first started to call him Lord Slytherin in the Gathering of the Lords. It had been a joke at first, but soon Godric and Salazar had lost their original names in court, and all lords called them by the names they had taken at Hogwarts. You said it yourself, the lads we teach know more than a lad taught by solely one master, he started. But that new knowledge isn't just a blessing for the lads, it's also a curse. A curse? The other lords looked at each other, frowning. Yes, a curse. Until now, the lads taught by one master respected their wives after marriage because they knew that their wife had been taught magic like they had been, just from their fathers and not from masters. But now I started to hear words at Hogwarts that the lasses were worth nothing but 2 birthday heir. This new development concerns me because we wizards always respected our women highly. He hadn't outright lied when he spoke to the gathering, but he definitely had stretched reality a little bit, not talking about the slight manipulation he had done by sending out his Slytherins to talk exactly like that near the other 4 founders. Thanks to Fire and Ice for the missing house colours that would adorn the apprentice robes in future. Lord Gryffindor. Lord Grim? Lord McGonagall said with a concerned voice. It was clear that he wanted their opinion on that matter. I fear that Salazar is not exaggerating, Peveril said, sighing. Godric, Rowena, Helga and I also heard the rumours. Yes, definitely thanks to Wind and Fire for the missing difference on the students' robes. The other lords frowned. Tell me, Lord Slytherin, do you have an idea what to do against that problem? Lord McGonagall said. I thought about it long and hard, Sal answered while inclining his head. The only option I see is to grant the lasses the same education the lads have. I would propose to let them go to Hogwarts. The answer was a commotion, and Sal had to raise his hand and wait a few minutes before he could continue. Of course I know the problems that come with it. It wouldn't be proper to let the lasses live with the lads. The idea I have would be that the lasses have their own dorm rooms in the houses. The dorm rooms are shielded so that a lad is unable to enter. When the lasses go to class, they will go together and a house elf will accompany them. They will sit extra in the Great Hall, and they will be allowed to take books from the library to read them in their dorm rooms. The castle will be warded so that a lad will be unable to come near unmarried lasses and lasses they aren't married with in an improper way. I wrote wards that will be able to distinguish what is proper and what isn't. It had been hard to create these wards, and it had taken him the most of the last 3 years, but it was worth it, he was sure about that. Every professor who will teach at Hogwarts will have to take an oath that they won't behave in an improper way towards their charges. Every lass will be told the name of a house elf who will guard her if she wants to go somewhere by herself, or who will aid her if she is in a dangerous situation. Like that, it still should be proper for the lasses, and at the same time the rumours that are at the academia in the moment will put to rest indefinitely. The lords looked at each other with unsure eyes. They still hesitated. Don't forget that it is a lass who will later on teach her children her knowledge first. Long before the lads go to Hogwarts, it is their mother who tells them about magic. Because of that, a lass who knows more about magic will easier get a marriage contract than a lass who knows next to nothing. If they would have the same education like the lads again, their worth would just get higher than it is now, and then it would be when the lads leave Hogwarts with the thoughts they have now about the lasses. This time the faces of the lords were grim. He got them. Sal smiled. At least he did until the first question was asked. The next 20 minutes were pure horror. Sal was questioned mercilessly, and finally the lords decided to think about it by themselves for another 2 days before they decided. 2 days later the lords gave in. The lassies would go to Hogwarts after harvest, and Sal had finally gotten what he had wanted for years. The day later Lord McGonagall proposed to make it mandatory to attend Hogwarts. He explained his reasoning that if the lassies also attended, he wanted to shield them as much as possible, and to add Hogwarts and its rules to the law would just aid them in the long way. The other lords nodded. It wouldn't do well if a lass was kidnapped, because 2 clans were warring, and one of the clans decided that it would be easier to kidnap the daughter of the other clan leader instead of to try another way for peace. But with that, the problems only started. With the entrance of the girls, Sal finally lifted the charm from the missing dormitories, something that brought him some raised eyebrows from the other 4 founders. Sal just shrugged and grinned when they looked at him, until Rowena finally huffed and declared, "I should have known it," and with that they moved on to other tasks. The summer the girls gained entrance was also the summer they finally had to invite some more teachers to aid them. With the incoming girls, it was simply too many students to teach them with only 5 of them. "So," Godric said when they had their customary meeting at the Great Hall shortly before harvest, "we have 3 new teachers this year. A teacher for astrology, a teacher for etiquette and writing, and a teacher for creature lore." Godric was beaming when he mentioned the matron who would take over etiquette and writing. Since they had decided earlier that summer that they needed more teachers, he had started to look for someone who could relieve him from his duties in that part. He had been ecstatic when an old widow had decided that she would like to teach that part to the children. Godric simply hated to teach etiquette and writing. "And sometime after Beltane our new potion master will arrive," Peveril added. Sal just grimaced. He didn't know the man who would take over potions from him, and he definitely wasn't very happy in that regard. The other teachers he had been able to get to know beforehand, but the recommended potion master had been touring the country, so that at the end Sal hadn't met him. The only one who had was Godric, and Sal definitely didn't trust Godric in that regard. Godric, after all, wasn't even able to distinguish the top of a cauldron from its bottom. "There's also a request from the lords to visit the school regularly," Peveril added in that moment. "No," Sal said instantly. The others stared at him. "We're talking about their children, Salazar," Helga said. "I am sure that a lot of them would be more at ease if they knew exactly how their children are living." "They didn't request this since we founded Hogwarts, so why now?" Sal countered. "Maybe it's because their daughters are also starting to learn here," Rowena suggested softly. Sal frowned, but then he sighed. "Then let them come for a day and we show them," he said. This time it was Peveril who frowned. "Salazar," he said, sighing. "There were multiple requests that they want to have access to the Academia day and night. We others thought it a good idea." "Yes," Godric said. "Especially the mundane parents will be relieved if they can come and see their children whenever they—" "No mundane will set their feet on this land." Sal knew he sounded racist in that moment, but in front of his inner eye he saw the icy steel blade coming through his chest, and he heard the battle cries and the sound of the dying from the day he died for Camelot. "I won't allow anyone absolute access to this land." "Salazar," Godric stared at him, his eyes blasting. "We are talking about the parents of our apprentices." "I don't care!" Sal countered, hissing. "They don't belong here. They won't come here. That's my final word." Godric and the others gawked at him. "This is our Academia," Godric finally said coolly. "You have no right to decide this by yourself. The others are all for it, and we will follow whatever the majority decided." Sal bared his teeth at him. "This is my ancestral home, Godric, and whatever chimera you are following, I won't sacrifice my family's sacrifice just to comply with your wishes." And with that he stormed out of the Great Hall, not able any more to look the others in the eye. He had told them time after time that the wards of the castle were based on soul magic. Had they never even once thought about what that truly meant? He couldn't believe that Godric and the others were willing to destroy the wards of the castle, wards that kept them safe, just to follow the wishes of the gathering of the lords. The days and weeks after their disagreement, Godric ignored him, something the whole academia found out as soon as the children returned. Rowena and Helga had a different approach. Instead of treating him with silent and the cold shoulder, they tried again and again to change his stance on admitting the parents to Hawks. Finally, Rowena snapped. "You are utterly childish in this regard, Salazar," she cried, frustrated. "Why don't you even try to listen to us? Even you can see that it would just aid us in the cooperation of the gathering if they had the ability to visit the academia whenever they wanted." "I don't care about the gathering," Sal replied calmly. "I told you weeks ago why I will never give in to your pleas. I won't change just because you hope I do. We built this place to teach apprentices. You can't suddenly start with refusing some of them entrance just because their parents want to see the academia beforehand. And I told you that the parents can come if they must. Let them come for a day, not whenever they feel like it. But I don't think that a master would have tolerated the parents coming to his home whenever they wanted just to check on their child." "No, but this is different." "It isn't," Sal hissed, "and I won't give in. If you want the parents coming whenever they want, then search for another building. They won't come here, and that's my final word on that matter." After that, Rowena stopped speaking to him as well. Helga instead looked at him with bafflement. "You never outright refused anything we planned to do," she said. "Why now?" "Because until now your decisions were reasonable," Sal said. "Now you are just blinded by the words of the lords." Helga just frowned at him when he said that. "I don't think we're blinded," she said. "I mean, what's so bad about letting the parents see their children? They wouldn't do any harm." Sal just snorted. "You have no idea how the wards you live under work, so how do you know their visit truly does no harm? And I told you one time, all right, let them come, but after that there is no need for them to be here." Helga just sighed. "You are acting like a child, Salazar," she said. "I know you are possessive of this castle, but being possessive and acting like you do are two different kinds of shoes." Sal just sneered at her. After that, Helga also stopped speaking to him. Salazar still didn't move an inch from his point of view. He knew he couldn't give in, even when Godric started to hiss at him, bigot and mundane hater. After Sal still didn't give in, even 2 months into the new school year. It hurt to be treated like that, not just by Godric, but also by the women, but Sal couldn't give in. If he did, he would have to destroy the soul wards so that the parents were able to get in, and that was one thing he would never be able to do. Still, it would be the only way to comply with the other founders' wishes. Surely there would be some parents that could gain access without him destroying the wards, parents that needed a sanctuary and that had pure intentions. But the rest of them would be unable to enter without Sal letting them in, and he couldn't stand guard at the entrance forever just so that they could enter. "There's a reason why you won't give in to their wishes, isn't there?" Peveril said one evening. Sal had been outside, sitting on a rock at the lake. He startled when he suddenly heard Peveril's voice next to him. Peveril had said nothing to the argument he had been having with the other founders. The other man had not stood by his side, but he also hadn't taken the side of his wife and the others. Instead, he had chosen to treat Sal like he had always been threatening him. Sal shrugged. "When was there a time I would do something without a suitable reason?" he asked softly, staring unseeingly at the lake. Tomorrow was Beltane, and the day after the new potion master would come to Hogwarts. "I don't remember a time you hadn't had a good reason," Peveril said softly. "Why don't you give in to the—" It was a question, not an accusation, but still Sal hesitated. Then he sighed and looked up at the sky and the wards that were shielding them, unseen to the naked eye. "The soul wards? Do you know how they are created?" he asked softly, deciding to explain his reason one last time. Peveril shrugged. "Not really. I know you have to die for them so that they can come into existence. I don't know how exactly they are created and how exactly they work, but I doubt that even you know how they were created and how they work exactly." Sal sighed again. Then he rubbed his face tiredly. "I know how they were created," he said. I know exactly how they were created. Peveril looked at him astonished. How? I mean, shouldn't it have been your father who created the wards on Hogwarts? Sal just shrugged. The blood wards on the castle. Sure, he said. Peveril looked at him oddly. There are no blood wards on the castle but ours, Salazar, he said. I might not know a lot about warding, but I am definitely sure about that one. Sal just rubbed his face again. Soul wards, he finally explained, are based on normal blood wards. The blood wards developed to soul wards if he stopped and rubbed his chest. His heart was pounding in his chest. He could hear the battle cries of the past and the sound of people dying. He could feel the cold steel piercing his chest and could hear his heart stop. Salazar? He startled and the memory let him go again. Peveril looked at him concerned. Salazar, what happened just now? Nothing, Sal's voice was hoarse. Forgive me. Peveril just frowned. What did you want to say before you stopped speaking? And with that question the phantom pain and the noise in his ears were back. He fought against his past that tried to swallow him whole again and cursed his eidetic memory. Salvazar? Sal's head snapped up when he heard his correctly pronounced name on Peveril's lips. Are you all right? Peveril's hands softly touched Sal's own, which was unconsciously rubbing his chest above his heart. Then Peveril's hand grabbed Sal's and slowly pulled it away from Sal's chest. Are you hurt, Salvazar? The name was spoken slowly, carefully. It was surprisingly painful to hear his correct name from the lips of another, not drunk person again. I am well, forgive me, Peveril. The other man did clearly not believe him. Instead he tugged at Sal's tunic and finally raised it to look beneath it. Sal's mind needed a moment to catch up with what Peveril was doing, and when he understood the other man's action, he was too late to stop him. Peveril's huge concerned eyes met his. When did that happen? He asked softly, still watching Sal closely, his eyes straying every other second to the horrible scar on Sal's chest, the scar Sal had been rubbing all the time. Sal met his gaze head-on. The question is not when, Peveril, it is where and why, he corrected the now grim-looking man. Then tell me where it happened. Tell me why it happened. Peveril repeated his question carefully, his gaze sincere and sad. Sal hesitated another moment, the noises of the battlefield again filling his mind. It happened just a few miles from here, he said softly. It happened because I had to shield the castle and the people in it. Peveril's eyes searched his face. The soul wards, Sal wasn't sure if it was a question or a comment, but he answered anyway. They were created when my fathers and I died, trying to protect the castle. Sal said softly. The answer was a sharp intake of breath, and a warm hand touched the ugly scar on his chest questioningly. I was pierced by a sword from behind, Sal supplied while he watched the empty sky. It went right through my heart. Every other man would have died. And for a moment or two I indeed did die. I just couldn't stay dead. Immortality, Peveril said slowly. Immortality like the one the gathering was talking about. Sal chuckled weakly. It wasn't intended. I was born that way. Peveril said nothing for a moment, then he sighed again. So the soul wards, he said probingly. They started to exist because my family and I died that day, Sal said. If I would do like the others want me to, I would have to destroy them. I would have to destroy the last legacy of my whole family for the hunger for power of a few arrogant lords. The answer was a sharp intake of breath, and Sal finally found the strength to look at Peveril again. Understanding and horror filled the eyes of the other man. His warm hand on Sal's chest moved until it was able to squeeze Sal's shoulder. I'll talk to them, Peveril said, clearly meaning the other founders. Even they can't stay angry at you if they know that you would have to destroy the wards to abide their wishes. Sal just snorted. I told them that truth weeks ago, Peveril, he said bitterly. They don't care. Peveril just pressed his lips together. They care, he objected softly. They just don't truly understand what those wards mean. I'll tell them that your family sacrificed their lives for them. If they still don't listen, I'll tell them that you died to shield this castle from everything and that I can't ignore such a sacrifice for something fickle like the desire of men." With that he stood up and walked away back to the castle. "And if they won't listen?" Sal called after him. "Then I tell the gathering of the lords, no myself," Peveril said without turning. "Some things are too precious to destroy just to fulfill unreasonable wishes." They listened, and slowly everything returned back to normal. The years passed, and the trial run with the girls was seen as a success, so Sal put forth his next wish after he was sure that there would be no protest from anyone. He wanted them to write down in their law that Hogwarts would be separated from any legal institution that was or was yet to come. The laws of Hogwarts were to be unchangeable. Some days later he and the other founders really made the contract with the Council of Lords to secure the freedom of Hogwarts and its students in every conflict that would come to be. It was a security measure. Everyone else thought too much, but Sal insisted, and Lord Slytherin, as he was called now, had long ago gained a reputation of getting what he wanted. The last nail to this reputation had been the year before when he had added the girls to Hogwarts. "And you say you don't have ambition," Peveril said after the contract was sealed, "arguing with the council until Hogwarts is practically an own country, and then securing it until not even a rat could come in unnoticed." "Well, I have to keep them all out," Sal answered. "No lord, no mundane, no pureblood, no sorcerer or sorceress who does not go to school here should be able to enter without being noticed." "As if we would ever allow any purebloods to enter Hogwarts," Godric said, snorting. Sal grinded his teeth. "Why shouldn't we?" he asked his friend softly. Instead, he knew Godric. Godric was a kind man, a little bit gullible and sometimes too ready to accept a story as truth, but still a kind man. "Because of the stories. Haven't you heard what kind of horrible monsters they are?" Those words were like a punch in Sal's gut. Monsters. His gentle, good-hearted Atre, his ever-freezing but loving grandma, his soft-spoken grandpa, his wonderful son. Monsters. "How do you know that they are monsters?" he asked, his voice still gentle. Over the last years, the aversion towards purebloods had strengthened, especially since there were year after year reports of cruel murders by a pureblood on the continent. Sal had tried to keep an eye on it, but even with his reprimands, a lot of children had started to speak about purebloods as if they were monsters, if they didn't call them monsters outright. "Because the stories said so, Salazar," Godric replied, "and I won't endanger the children by allowing purebloods at Hogwarts. There will never be purebloods there ever." "You have no say in that, Godric," Sal returned coolly, and swept away. He knew he should have confronted his friend. He knew he should have talked to the man, but instead he was unable to even look at the man in question. It wasn't even the first time he had heard Godric saying something like that, and until now he had reprimanded his friend sharply. But today had been different. Monsters. He didn't know why and when Godric also had started to adopt the current stance against furbolgs, or purebloods like they were called now. He just knew that his friend had. Sal often wondered if it was simply a problem of Godric not truly knowing about furbolgs. Maybe if he knew. Sal shook his head and instead opted to do what he always did in the last months when he was agitated by the bigotry around him and unable to fight against it any longer. He vanished in the 7th floor where he and Peveril were experimenting with magic. They had started their experiments after that day on the lake and had since then hidden a room away so that no one other would stumble over their experiments. Well, at least it had been a room at the beginning. Sal wasn't quite sure what to call the construct now, after it had been thoroughly embedded with rune chains and circles as well as some blood magic and experimental potions. And it definitely hadn't just been Sal who had done the work. Peveril was the leader behind the project, Sal just the one who visualized what Peveril dreamt up. A little bit more, so Peveril, and then they would activate it. Sal just hoped they wouldn't blow up the castle while doing so. Unbeknown to them, sometime in the future the room would become a legend. The come-and-go room, they would call it, the Room of Requirement. Until then it just would be one thing to Sal, a room where he could vent his frustration with Godric and his suddenly bigoted apprentices. It was 3 weeks later and Salvazar was teaching potions. The potion teacher Godric had hired was nothing but sloppy and unhelpful. If Sal would have had any say, the man would have left Hogwarts years ago. But the others insisted that he was a splendid teacher and objected every time Sal brought it up when it happened. The wards Sal knew so well started to hum with life. A refugee had found their way to Hogwarts. Sal stood up from where he sat and then looked over his class to see how far along they were with their potion. The most of them were done. Good. 5 more minutes, he said, and then waited until even the last student had left the classroom before he closed it down and headed to the small hut he had built outside for those who came as refugees. The sight he met was nothing he had expected. It was a herd of centaurs, not just men and women but children as well, standing warily in front of the hut waiting. It was one of the newer protections of the castle that led the refugees to the hut and gave them the impression to wait there until they were welcomed. And as always, it had to be Sal who welcomed them. After all, he was the lord of the land, even if his ancestral home had turned in an academia over time. Sal stopped within a slight distance and then bowed. "I bid you a good day, strangers," he greeted them softly. "I am Salvazar Emrys, the lord of the land. Welcome to my home." The centaurs definitely didn't seem to know what to make of him. Finally, one grim and old-looking centaur stepped forward, his keen eyes never leaving Sal's lithe form. "I am Morrowind, Salvazar Emrys," he said. "Tell me, lord of the land, will you also chase us away from this land?" Sal frowned. "Chase you away?" he asked, uncomprehending. "My home is a sanctuary for everyone who needs it. So tell me, why should I send you away?" The centaurs traded nervous glances, but Morrowind just looked at him coolly. "Because that is what sorcerers do these days to my kind," he said, sneering. "They chase us from our homes, and wherever we go there is no way to escape them. Godric won't be happy. If that is what they are doing, you are welcome to live on my lands," Sal said. He knew that Rowena, Peveril and Helga wouldn't object, and he definitely had no interest in even asking Godric. "Just be aware that we have a lot of children here, so please don't be hostile towards them, even if they might act hostile towards you at first." Morrowind stared at him. "You know we count to the pure bloods, don't you?" he finally asked Sal, disbelief coloring his voice. It seemed as if his herd had met too many hostile sorcerers to not be wary around him. Sal just shrugged. "I am a pure blood myself," he said. "Well, mixed-born pure blood, but pure blood nonetheless." The leader of the herd, Sal, was sure that Morrowind was exactly that, bowed his head after hearing that, and then turned to look at the rest of his herd. Whatever silent communication took place, Sal did not know, but when Morrowind turned back to him, he could see the decision in the centaur's eyes. "We would like to stay if we can," he said. "Would it be all right if we took the woods to live in?" Sal's gaze turned to the woods at his right. "We might have to enter for potion ingredients and hunting," he warned. The centaur just nodded. "We are used to share the woods with sorcerers. If you allow us to stay, we even might help you with your hunts now and then." For a moment Sal pondered those words, but then he inclined his head. "So mote it be," he said. "And be assured that I will talk to the children we teach, so that they won't enter the woods without one of us adults nearby. We won't disturb you unnecessarily." This time the centaur inclined his head, relief clearly written in his face. "I thank you again, lord of the land. My kinsmen and I are in your debt." Sal didn't protest these words. It would have been an insult to the centaur if he had. At least it was in all the customs he knew, and he guessed that it was the same with the centaur's custom as well. So instead of objecting, he went with them until they reached the woods, and then turned and headed back to the castle. Godric was waiting for him in the entrance hall. It was obvious that he had overheard Sal's talk with the centaurs. "What is the meaning of that?" Godric growled, not even trying to be quiet. "They needed a place to stay, so they stayed," Sal answered, coolly. He knew from the look on Godric's face that he would have to fight tooth and nails to bring Godric to even listen to him, but Sal knew that he couldn't back down. Somewhere he had to draw the line, and frankly, he was exhausted after being belittled non-stop since at least 2 years. They needed a place to stay. They needed a place to stay. That's your excuse. Have you even thought about the children we are protecting in these walls? Godric hissed. Of course I have. They are no threat to the children, Sal answered, sighing. That's what you think, Salazar. But look at them. They are unnatural. You can see it by just looking at them. They are pure bloods. They definitely have no right to be at Hogwarts. Hogwarts is a sanctuary, Godric. For everyone. Sal hissed back, Parseltongue creeping into his voice. They have every right to be there if they need protection. Oh, and the next thing you say is that we should take in their children as apprentices? Godric mocked ursily. I can see it right now. Beast trotting all over the stairs of Hogwarts. They are no beasts, Sal replied harshly. What's happening to you, Godric? You weren't like that when I first met you. Maybe I grew up. Yes, in a bigot? I am not a bigot. You definitely are now, Godric. We are talking about children and you call them beasts. So I should use monsters instead. Godric hissed furiously. They are children, Godric. Children. They have hooves. Because they are centaur children, Sal countered. If they were vampires, they definitely wouldn't have hooves, and I would have welcomed them nonetheless. Vampires? You're telling me that if a vampire would come and ask for his brood to attend Hogwarts, you simply would say yes, yes. Then tell me, what in Morgana's name are you thinking, Salazar? Pure bloods in Hogwarts? Godric cried. I will not have any pure blood child at Hogwarts. They are children, Godric. Sal countered heatedly again. Children like every other mixed blood. The only difference is their parentage. I will not exclude them just because they have 2 pure-blooded parents and not just one. We will not have any children with a pure-blood parent in my school, Godric yelled. I do not need a child who bites others or does who knows what with them. Pure bloods are dangerous. They aren't human. You can't teach them to be humans. They are monsters. Monsters? Sal repeated, hissing. He knew they strayed from the original discussion, but maybe it was long overdue, to be frank with Godric. Monsters? How dare you? How dare you? Godric yelled. Do you have any idea what Peverell and I would lose if it came out that we took in pure-blooded children? We would be socially ruined. Fine, then throw them all out. If you do not want the pure-blooded children here, then I don't want the mixed-blooded in Hogwarts. Their blood is dirty, after all. Not that he really meant that statement, but he couldn't stop himself. The resentment had festered over the last few years, and he couldn't stop now, even if he wanted to. You? Godric shouted, and drew his sword. How dare you to insult our apprentices? I do not care, Sal hissed. They insult me all the time. Why should I care if I insult them this time? They are exactly like you. I bore your insulting words long enough. I do not care anymore. I give up in trying to change your ways. So just shut up. What are you talking about? Godric yelled. I definitely don't insult you. Why should I? You don't insult me? You don't insult me? Sal hissed. You call me a monster all the time, and you tell me you don't insult me. You call my son a monster, my father, my grandparents, and now you tell me you don't insult me. Try again. This monster is not human enough to understand the words of a lowly biased wannabe mixed blood. Biased wannabe mixed blood? Godric repeated. Are you insulting me now? And if I am, who cares? Sal countered. I definitely don't mind telling you the truth to your face if I have to. The truth? The truth? What truth? The truth you don't want to see, Sal hissed. Just take a look at our apprentices. They might be good, but they would be better if they could learn from pure-blood children some different ways to use their... I will not have a pure blood in my house. Godric yelled. Fine, then they will be in mine. I don't care. If I have to, then I will reject the mixed-blooded ones and just take pure bloods. You sound as if you think your apprentices weren't worth your time just because they are mixed blood. I just said that they could benefit from a pure blood along the way, Sal countered. Pure bloods know things that a mixed blood never. Godric's sword pressed against Sal's throat. A single red tear rolled down to Sal's collarbone. I never thought you would be such a biased little piece of... Godric. Godric stopped mid-sentence and looked up. At the top of the stairs stood Helga, looking at them with huge frightened eyes. Helga, Godric, what's going on? Peveril stopped behind his wife, staring at the scene in front of him. Godric, why do you have your sword at Salazar's throat? Because I have put up long enough with his biased ways of thinking, Godric said, enraged. My biased ways of thinking? My, Sal hissed. Until now I never mentioned any kind of bias. How dare you to accuse me if you are the one who looks at a child and sees a monster, when you are the one who looks at my son and sees a monster? Your son? Your son? I never met your son. The blade edged deeper in Sal's throat, but he didn't move an inch. He did not even show them the pain he felt, physically and emotionally. No, he said in a low voice, you never met him, but you call him a monster anyway. Why should I call your son a monster? This time Godric definitely looked confused, his rage dimmed by the new emotion. I don't know, I never thought you to be the biased kind either. So tell me, Godric, why do suddenly you call me a monster? Peveril and Helga gasped. You did? Godric, why? Helga said, staring at her confused-looking brother. Here, but I didn't. Why should I call you a monster? He said, lowering his sword a little so that it was resting on Sal's shoulder. Sal just stared at the man in front of him, still feeling furious and absolutely hurt. I don't know. All I know is that you did. You called me a monster to my face. You called my father, my grandparents and my son a monster to my face. And you ask me why I would be furious with you. I would never. This whole discussion was about pure bloods and pure-blooded children in Hogwarts. That discussion wasn't about you or your family. Well, newsflash, Godric. I am a pure blood. My father was a pure blood. My grandparents were. My son is. I might be a mixed-born pure blood, but a pure blood nonetheless. I never thought you would think of me as a creature unable to behave human. And with that, Sal turned and stormed out of the castle. He needed space. He definitely needed space, and a time away from Godric. He had endured enough for today. I cannot believe you told him he is not human enough to be considered such, Helga said, staring at her brother with accusing eyes. Pray that he will forgive you, because if he doesn't, I will throw you out of Hogwarts without a second thought. She turned and left from where she came from. But Godric said, But I never thought that a pure blood could be so normal. I mean the stories. You are a fool, Godric, Peveril said, sighing. How can you be imbecilic enough to believe in fairy tales? But Godric stared at Peveril helplessly. Don't you dare to try and find comfort in me or Rowena. After all, I am a pure blood as well, and from the sound of it I am nothing more than a wild beast in your eyes. And with that he left, leaving Godric standing in the entrance hall, looking lost, helpless and weighted down by his own guilt. That was the day Salazar Slytherin left Hogwarts. Back to Future timeline. When Harry finally returned to the common room, it was long dark outside, and curfew had been so long ago that even the most daring students had found themselves in the safety of the tower long before Harry had even gone near it. Harry was fuming. In the headmaster's office he might have given up on arguing with the man, but as soon as he had entered the room of requirement, and with that had left Dumbledore's territory, Harry's fury had returned tenfold. It wasn't the prospect of having to learn occlumency again that left him burning with rage, but the knowledge that someone had tattled on the headmaster. And someone had. It wasn't a guess, Harry knew. If someone hadn't, the headmaster might have been suspicious, would have been suspicious, but he wouldn't have had enough evidence to be sure about that. And now Harry had occlumency lessons with Snape of all people. As if Harry hadn't enough on his plate already. So Harry had gone to the room of requirement and had worked out until he was soaked in sweat and tired enough to drop dead, just to return to the common room and seeing Hermione and Ron waiting for him on one of the sofas. "Harry," Hermione exclaimed when she saw him enter. "Where have you been?" Harry's first instinctive reaction was to sneer at her and tell her she had no right to know. but then he stopped. Of course, Hermione had no right to know. She might be a friend, but not his mother. On the other hand, she was his friend, and as a friend she at least had the right to ask. "Running," Harry answered, after contemplating his answer. "I needed to clear my head." Hermione blinked at his answer, surprise visible in her eyes, but it was Ron who told them the obvious. "Harry," he said, "you never ran before when you needed to clear your head." Harry just sighed and decided that he wouldn't go anywhere until his friends were satisfied with his answer, so he plunked down on the sofa next to theirs. "I didn't have my broom with me and I needed to get out," he said tiredly. "Harry," this time Hermione's voice sounded hesitant. "What happened?" She stopped for a moment, then continued with a stronger, surer-sounding voice. "I know you had detention with Umbridge tonight, but what happened afterwards? I mean, she didn't keep you until now, did she?" Harry was just in time to repress his sneer. "No," he said, his own voice icy. The headmaster called afterwards for a little chat, his eyes first fixed on Hermione, then on Ron. Hermione and Ron shared a glance, and suddenly Harry knew. The fury he had worked of just minutes ago returned in all its glory. It had been those two in front of him who went to the headmaster. "Do you want to tell me something, maybe?" he asked coolly. "I don't know what." "Don't play innocent with me," Harry hissed, and the fury he had felt before returned to the open for a moment before he was able to suppress it again. "Someone," he looked from Hermione to Ron and back while he held his temper in check, "went to Dumbledore and told him that maybe that I was acting strange, or that I changed my behavior with Malfoy or Snape, or that I was doing better in a class I hated. Who knows? Whatever Dumbledore was told, it gave him the idea that I needed Snape to teach me occlumency. Now tell me, was it you two who tattled on me?" The ice of his fury was bleeding in his voice at the end of his tale. Ron gawked at him. Hermione looked guilty. "Harry?" she finally said hesitatingly. "No," he interrupted her, coolly. "No, Hermione. I don't care what you told him, I just care that you did." "But, Harry, you are acting strange. Then why didn't you come to me?" Harry asked her when the fury he felt left him. Of course, those two in front of him were still children, and children made mistakes, but that didn't excuse their actions. "Why did you run to Dumbledore instead of asking me?" "Because you wouldn't have told us." Ron interrupted him. Ron's face was turning red, and he was clearly losing his temper. "You never tell us the important things. You just clam up and say nothing. Like last year in the tournament. Like in second year the parcel tongue. Like—" "I do not clam up," Harry hissed. The slight hisses of the snake language started to caress his words, adding the musical sound of his native tongue to the spoken English. "I was muggle-raised, Ron. I did not know about parcel tongue being special, and I definitely did not clam up at the tournament. You, Ron, were the one who refused to speak to me because you thought I had entered myself in this stupid tournament. Neither of you ever asked me directly about anything. You just want me to come to you and tell you everything, and if I don't, you run to the next teacher you can find." "That's not true," Hermione said with huge eyes. "You always refuse to listen, like the time Sirius sent you the firebolt. And did you ever try to explain to me why you thought the firebolt was dangerous, Hermione?" Harry asked her softly. "Did you ever share your reason with me before you ran to Professor McGonagall?" Hermione opened her mouth to retort, but instead made the imitation of a goldfish. "Well, Hermione?" Harry had leaned forward and looked at her with old, cool and tired eyes. She blinked and then blurted out, "But the firebolt could have been dangerous." "Yes," Harry said, "but you could have told me your reasons before you went and ran to a teacher. You could have talked to me, just like you could have talked to me before you ran to Dumbledore this time around. But you were acting strange, with Malfoy, with Snape, and you didn't talk to us like you usually did." Ron said furiously. "That might be right," Harry said, "but you simply could have told me that you were worried about me and asked me what is wrong." "I asked you what is bothering you and you told me you were fine," Hermione retorted. "Yes, you asked me what is bothering me. Have you ever thought that that was the wrong question to ask? Have you ever thought that you should have simply asked me why I was different than you knew me? I cannot read your mind. How by wind and fire should I know what you are worried about? Hermione's mouth snapped shut. She stared at him with huge, unbelieving eyes. But, Ron stuttered. No, Ron, Harry said coolly. Just once, Ron. Think about how you would feel if you had a nightmare one night and instead of leaving it be, I'd run to your mum and wake her up just to tell on you. Tell me, would you like that? Of course not. Well, congratulations, you just did the same to me. You might not have run to my mum, but to a teacher, but the principle in the end is the same. You tattled on me. So excuse me if I won't talk to you for the next days. I need to calm down. And with that Harry stood and left the room, leaving two guilt-ridden teenagers behind. Of course Harry knew that the other two were still teens and because of that made more mistakes than they would have made otherwise. But that was no excuse. Harry wouldn't go easy on them because they still hadn't learned that the world was a cruel place. Some things you had to learn when you were young, and one of those was that you shouldn't go behind another one's back, especially if this person was your friend. It was all right to worry, but the first approach had always to be the person you worried about and not an authority figure. Maybe they would learn in time. It was Saturday morning and Augusta Longbottom was sitting in the leaky cauldron, waiting for the one man she had always admired. Good morning, Augusta. Augusta Longbottom turned fluently, in absolute contrast to her age, and had drawn her wand faster than most people were able to react. Regrettably, the other party wasn't most people, and so she had lost her wand as soon as she drew it. She stared at the man within surprise, but still ready to defend herself, even without her wand. The man instead just smiled at her and rounded the table to sit down in the chair on the opposite of her table. Her wand was set down on the table and rolled back to her. Who? She started to say, but then she stopped mid-sentence. She knew who. Those deathly green eyes were one of a kind. Professor, she greeted, still baffled how the young boy in front of her could be the same man who had taught her ancient runes when she was still a student at Hogwarts. But he had known her and had answered her letter with knowledge that no one but the professor ever had. Knowledge that he wouldn't have shared, not even with his own sons or grandsons. Augusta Selwyn, the young man answered, smiling, recognition in his eyes. Longbottom it was now. She nodded, still flabbergasted. How do you look so young? She finally asked him with huge eyes. The answer was a well-known kind smile, a smile she still remembered even after more than 100 years. The professor hesitated for a short moment before he sighed. The answer is not as simple as I'd like it to be, he said. Let's just say it's a family secret. Augusta blinked. A family secret, she repeated, and the man in front of her smiled. Let's look for a more secure place and I might tell you a bit more, was the reply. So Augusta Longbottom did what a Gryffindor would do. She stood up, took her wand and followed the man. They left the leaky cauldron, and when the man held out her arm for her, she slipped her hand in his. In the next moment she could feel the typical pressure of being apparated, and when she could see again, they stood in a windowless, dark room. On the wall was a crest, a silver snake, wrapped around a white lily on a light green grounding. She turned to the professor and raised an eyebrow, looking pointedly at the crest on the wall. The answer was a laugh. The family's crest, he said. I am afraid I won't be able to tell you what family it stands for. You can't tell me. It's the crest of a grand family, he replied. I will return to the Wizengamot. The answer was a shudder. You want to return to politics? The smile was anything but reassuring. Augusta contemplated when the man in front of her looked at her. Maybe, he said, and she knew he meant yes. And for Augusta there was just one road to take now. What do I have to do to be part of your scheme, whatever you're scheming, Professor Malfoy? The professor looked at her. Why do you ask, Augusta, he said. She smiled and shrugged. I remember your reputation when I was a child, she said. You were ruthless. You were feared and admired. I always wanted to be like you. Do you truly think I would give up an opportunity to work with my childhood idol? The answer was a surprised laugh. Don't laugh at me, Professor, Augusta said. I meant it. I know you did, the boy said, smiling. I just wasn't expecting it. I wasn't the only one who admired you, Augusta defended herself. Sholas Potter was at least as taken with you as I was. You were his absolute hero, the one man who couldn't do anything wrong. Believe me, if Albus Dumbledore and you would have been born at the same time, Albus would have never become as great as he did. He would have never gained the influence he has now if you still had been there when his star started to raise. The professor just smiled. I'm no hero, Augusta, he said, still smiling. I would have never fought against Grindelwald like he did. Augusta just snorted. Then tell me that you didn't all you could to fight him at the time he was a danger. The professor opened his mouth, but Augusta didn't even let him reply before she tattled on. I don't know where you were, I don't know what you did, but I know that you did everything you could to shield the innocent. That doesn't count, he said. Augusta just snorted. Just keep telling you that. Silence. Then she sighed and shook her head. Will you explain to me how you can look like a child even if you are older than I? The professor shrugged. I'm a Firbolg-born, he said. The son of an old one. I don't age like normal wizards do. A Firbolg-born. The word was foreign to Augusta. The grandson of a basilisk, he said and looked at her with deathly green eyes. I'm not human. Augusta blinked in surprise. Well, a part of her was surprised. Another part of her had long since understood that he couldn't be a normal wizard like everyone else. He just had always been too different for that. And yet you belong to a grand family. The professor shrugged. I was its founder, he said, and smiled at her. She gawked at him, and then decided she wouldn't be surprised by anything he told her anymore. What are you planning? The professor crooked his head. Interested in destroying the world like you know it now? He asked her. Interested in destroying the power base of the greatest and the most feared wizard in our time? Interested in rearranging our world to something no one would ever have dreamed of? You aren't planning those things. That isn't like you, Professor, Augusta replied. The answer was a smirk that would have had her running if it would have truly been aimed at her. I never said I wanted to do exactly that, the professor said. So what are you doing? The answer was a shrug. Someone messed with me, he replied, and Augusta shuddered. Will you be my ally? Revenge. He was out for revenge. There was just one thing Augusta could do to answer that question. What do you need? She said. Alastor Moody was in a bad mood. His target was gone, as in not there, as in vanished from Hogwarts. If he could just prove that that was actually the case, if he could prove that the lad had left Hogwarts on his own and had apparated somewhere, Moody would have had all the evidence he needed. To his utter regret, he had come too late to Hogwarts to see his victim leave. So instead of following his target, he was kicking stones through the grass, swearing, if he just could prove that the lad really had left Hogwarts and wasn't hiding somewhere Moody didn't know. Again he kicked a little stone and the stone vanished into the woods of the Forbidden Forest. Stupid insomniac child, Moody grumbled. Imbecilic hiding Slytherin in Gryffindor robes. A little black cat looked up at that and scrutinized the swearing Auror with its cold grey eyes. It had been sunbathing in the last warmth of autumn until a little stone had hit its back and woken it. Damn brat! And with that, the Auror turned and decided to use his time to do other things he wanted to do. The cat stood up and followed him until he left the grounds and apparated. Then the cat turned and returned with a huff to Hogwarts. Stupid, paranoid ex-Aurors? It was late evening on the same Saturday when Arthur Weasley and his two eldest sons arrived in the same room Augusta Longbottom had been apparated at in the early morning. Arthur looked nervously around the room. It was empty. At least it was until a hidden door opened and another man entered. In the next moment Arthur corrected himself. Not a man. A boy. A boy, not much older than his youngest son. Welcome, my kin, the boy greeted them. Arthur blinked, surprised. Then he decided to be better safe than sorry and bowed to the boy. His sons followed his lead. Head of house, he greeted in return. The answer was a soft smile. I don't insist on formality in informal settings, he said. You may call me Salva Sahar, or Sal if you have trouble with my name. Salva Sahar will be fine, my lord, Arthur answered, and relaxed. He had never been good with the customs of purebloods, one of the reasons his family had been labelled as blood traitors. Please, feel free to call me Arthur." Then he pointed at his sons. "These are my heir William, called Bill, and my second-born Charles, called Charlie." The other one nodded in acceptance and then gestured to a few seats in the corner. "Let's sit down before we will start our discussion." Arthur, Bill and Charlie followed. It was Bill who spoke as soon as they had sat down. "Tell me, my lord, what do you want with us?" Arthur looked a little bit unhappy at his son. The question might have been true, but there were definitely better ways to phrase it. But instead of feeling insulted, the boy in front of them laughed. "I didn't choose to send you the message because I want to use you for anything. Here, Weasley," he said, "I choose you because you are family and you have the right to choose if you want to associate with those you belong to in blood. You have to be very ambitious if you want to recreate a grand family. People like that normally choose exactly what kind of people they want to have in their family, and what kind they don't want, and normally they look for powerful allies, or people they can use for their own benefit," Bill answered coolly. "So forgive me if I don't believe you." The answer was again a laugh. "I'll send my invitation to the family to every direct descendant. I wouldn't have considered the Weasleys as they are first cousins if it hadn't been for Molly Weasley, nee Prewett. As she is the last of the Prewetts, I decided to invite the Weasleys, even if they are not as closely related as the rest I am inviting," the boy answered. "Of course the consequences are that I have also to invite another family, so that they can't protest the invite." "Excuse me?" Charlie asked, surprised. "What has inviting our family to do with inviting the other family?" Salvazar shrugged. "They are cousins to the Weasleys and the Grand Family," he answered casually. "At the same time, they are closely related to me. So you could say that they are as closely related as the Weasleys. So when I am inviting you, I will have to invite them. I don't mind. I don't like the current British head of the Branch family I am talking about, but they could be useful for me. So you selected us because of our use. What use would you get from us?" Bill said coolly. Arthur wanted to slap his boy for his rude tone. Salvazar just shrugged. "It is in my nature to consider the use of those people I associate with," he said, unimpressed. "To be straightforward, the value I see in your family would be a cursebreaker, a dragon tamer, a ministry worker, 3 more potentially promising children, 2 genius pranksters, and a trained researcher. That is the value you bring, and that is the value I seek. Nothing more, nothing less." The 3 Weasleys gawked at him. "And if we join the family, what would you have us do?" Arthur finally asked, giving up on customs. His sons had broken them way before, and their potential head of house didn't seem to mind. The boy shrugged. "Whatever you do now," he said. "Of course there are things I would forbid you to do or things I would encourage you to learn, but mostly I'm interested in keeping your family exactly like it is now." Charlie's eyes narrowed. "So what are the rules you expect us to follow?" he asked. Salvazar shrugged again. "Unity of the Grand Family in public. You can hate each other all you like when you're in private. As long as you are in public, you stand behind family." A reasonable demand, Arthur thought. "I also would expect you all submit to a health test. You will be tested for potions or spells." Nothing to object there, even if it would be embarrassing. "Another rule would be that all of you learn to occlude your mind. It will help against possession, compulsion, charms, or imperious. This is not negotiable on my side." This time, it was Bill who nodded in understanding. The goblins also insisted on the same safety measurements. They definitely were a good way to keep the whole family safe. "And lastly, the family comes first. I don't care what you believe. I don't care if you're light or dark. But I care if you decide to follow another man like little ducklings, unable to think for yourselves. If you join my family, your loyalty will be with your family. You might admire someone else, someone like Albus Dumbledore or Fudge, or whoever, but you won't follow them blindly. The family comes first. Work with them, admire them for all I care. But you will always think what your actions will do to the family name." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. It would be different than before. Until now he had always looked up at Dumbledore, but if he truly considered following this grand family, then he would have to look at the man with critical eyes. "What about you-know-who?" Charlie asked. "Would you be as lenient if we decided to join him?" This time the head of the house hesitated before he sighed. "I am not light," he said softly. "The Grand Family won't be light, and if it had been any other Dark Lord, Grindelwald, Morrigan, whoever, I wouldn't care if you admire him, at least not to a certain extent. I wouldn't like it if you'd follow him and if you'd kill people because of him, but I wouldn't mind it because you're dark, but because you are doing the wrong thing. Life is precious. As long as you don't endanger life, I don't care at all, except Tom Riddle. I'd care if you follow him. If you do and are unwilling to give up your alliance with him, I would never accept you in my family. Joining him might have been a mistake you made, but if you don't want to correct it, I won't have you in my family. Remember that." Charlie blinked, astonished. "Wait, you're saying we could be followers of Grindelwald as far as you care, and you wouldn't mind as long as we don't kill for him, but we can't follow Voldemort even if we don't kill for him? Why?" The answer was a snarl. "Simple," the boy head of house said, "because he is Tom Marvolo Riddle. He is a lying bastard, using everyone for his own benefit and doesn't allow people to stand aside. You're either for him or against him, not speaking of his deeds against this family." "Deeds against this family?" Bill asked, astonished. "What deeds are you talking about?" The answer was another snarl. "Like I see it, he is at fault for the murder of some of our family members. Even if you don't accept your part in this family, I will still count the Pruitt family to my family, and I don't accept allies who killed family members." This time Arthur felt his tears threatening to fall. He knew that Molly was still hurt after losing her brothers and that the Pruitt part was accepted by this unknown Grand Family, and not only accepted but also one of the reasons to refuse Voldemort. That was more and better than they had expected. "But you will still accept dark wizards as family members if they follow these rules?" Charlie asked in that moment. Death green eyes looked at them gravely. "You're going to?" Bill asked softly. "As in there are families you asked that are dark?" "Yes." Arthur, Bill and Charlie looked at each other. "May we ask who?" Bill finally said. "This Grand Family vanished when the 3 heirs of the family changed their names to escape prosecution," he finally said. "One family kept the new name they had chosen for themselves. The others married in 2 families who had women as their heirs." 5, Salvazar corrected. "The main family later split again when 2 other sons married the female heirs of lesser families." "So, what families are we talking about?" The answer was a grim smile. "We're talking about a dark, 2 neutral and 2 light families. One of the light ones are the Pruitts, the other one the Longbottoms. And of course there is the little problem with the Kin family. I will have to contact because I contacted you. This family will also be dark." Bill frowned. "You won't be able to get them all to join you. Normally light and dark do not mix, and the neutrals are neutral for a reason." Salvazar just shrugged. "So you won't join because of the possibility that dark or neutral families will be part of the family?" he asked them. Arthur's mind was reeling. This was the question. The one question he had been waiting for since the beginning of their meeting. Arthur knew that he wouldn't get more answers today. Salvazar had said what he wanted and what he could. Now Arthur had to accept or decline the offer. Like the Longbottoms had, Arthur had no illusion that the naming of said family meant that they said yes. You couldn't name a family who hadn't declared its standing to that point of time. So there was just one thing Arthur knew. 2 dark and 2 neutral families might still join the family. 2 dark. Would he be able to accept a dark family as relations? But then, Arthur and his family could finally be part of a family, could be shielded against those who looked down on them, but there was the chance that they had to work together with the likes of Malfoy, Crabbe, Goyle and McNair. But then, whoever would be part of the family wouldn't be a Death Eater, or at least a Death Eater any longer. So there was just the little problem that they might have to work together with former Death Eaters. Albus Dumbledore wouldn't be happy. It was that thought that stopped his thought process and made him grimace. Was that what he had become in the last years? A lackey of Dumbledore, solely worrying about pleasing the old man? Yes, Albus Dumbledore had the right idea. Yes, it was a good idea to follow him and fight against the Death Eaters and Voldemort. But Dumbledore was not responsible for their family like Bill had told him when the letter arrived. It was Arthur's choice. Solely Arthur's, well, and maybe the choice of his heirs. Arthur looked at his sons. Both of them looked grim and determined. He could see in their faces that they had thought about what they had learned. He looked at them inquiringly. Bill nodded softly at his father. A second later, Charlie did the same. And Dumbledore was not his keeper. No, Arthur said finally. We don't mind if the families in this grand family are light, neutral, or dark. Again Arthur took a steady breath, and then he leaped over the cliff and hoped Salvazar would catch him before he fell to his death. Metaphorically, of course. Hello, Tom. Tom, the innkeeper, of course, not the Dark Lord. Said man would have killed anyone who even dared to utter said name in front of him. Looked up from polishing his glasses. Zeno, he greeted the man in front of him. I've the next edition of my paper, Zeno said, and Tom took out the money pouch he kept behind his counter and gave it to Zeno. The money was from the sales of the last paper. Tom sold them and then gave Zeno his share of the money. When the man came with the next edition of his newspaper, "There's an article from Twist in it?" Tom asked, interested. Zeno just nodded. "Yes," he said. "I asked him to be a columnist for my newspaper after all. I need more of your papers today," Tom said as an answer. "They were gone just hours after you brought them the last time around." Xenophilius Lovegood, editor of the Quibbler, just stared at him in surprise. Then he nodded slowly. "Of course," he said. "I always knew that the two-nosed unicorn would interest a lot of people." Tom said nothing to that wisely. "So, how many do you want?" For a moment Tom contemplated his options. Then he shrugged with his shoulders and decided to take a risk. "Triple it," he said. It was a risk, but a small one with twist. Zeno just looked at him oddly, but finally nodded and did as he was told. As soon as Zeno was gone, Tom risked a glance at the article of twist. Ouch. That definitely would sell. The next week was a tense affair between the Golden Trio. Harry had made true of his statement and had stopped speaking to Ron and Hermione. Instead of sitting with them in the Great Hall, he sat with Neville. The quiet boy said nothing to that for the first 3 days, but a day later at lunch he finally cracked. "Harry?" he asked, hesitatingly. "What happened between you and Ron and Hermione?" Harry shrugged. "They decided to go to Dumbledore instead of talking it over with me," Harry answered, shrugging. "I won't talk to them until they understand that what they did is wrong." Neville blinked at that. "Oh?" he said. Stopped, but then pressed on. "Why did they think they had to go to Dumbledore? I mean, what did you do?" Harry shrugged again. "They think I act different than I did last year," he answered sincerely. This time Neville frowned. "Well, you do act different," he finally said nervously. "You don't antagonize Malfoy and Snape anymore, you know potions, and you are friendly with the Slytherins." Harry raised an eyebrow. "So you will also go to Dumbledore because of that?" he asked the timid boy coolly. Neville snorted. "No," he said, "but I would like to know what happened to change you that much." Then his eyes widened and he hastily added, "Just if you want to tell me that." Harry just smiled. "I learned about some things I never knew," he answered softly. "Like my heritage and my status in the wizarding world. I simply cannot continue to act like I did. Now that I learnt about it, it wouldn't do me any good, especially when I enter the Wizengamot." "So you're planning to enter full-time?" Neville asked him, interested. "I thought you might want to keep the proxy you had until now. I mean, that's what the most of us do who are still at school." Harry shrugged. "I don't know who my proxy is at the moment," he said, sighing. "I was never told anything about my seat in the Wizengamot by anyone until now. If my proxy did not approach me when I returned to the wizarding world, do you really think he still has the right to call himself my proxy? He should have met with me years ago and not continue to vote in my stead without even asking me what I want." This Neville definitely could not object. "So you're taking on your seat full-time," he concluded. Harry shrugged. "We'll see," he said. "There are still some variables I have to calculate before I decide." Neville blinked at that. "You know you will lose political clout if you don't go to the first Wizengamot meeting next term," he said, watching his friend closely. Harry shrugged. "I know," he answered Neville's inquiry, "but the truth is, I still don't know how I should do it. After all, officially I still have no idea about my heritage. Then how? The answer was a smirk. There's a secret in my family, Harry answered him, still smirking. A secret not even Dumbledore knows. What has that to do with you knowing? Simple. The secret has to do with the goblins. And goblins never break their word. Neville shuddered when he heard that. Harry, of course, was right. A goblin never broke its word, but they were deceiving little things who would do anything to have the advantage. That Harry's family secret was with the goblins could mean just one thing. They would have done anything to share it with Harry if that was what they had been asked to do. No wonder Harry knew about his responsibilities. So the goblins told you, Neville concluded, still shuddering. Harry shrugged. Something like that, he answered the timid boy. After that answer, Neville decided not to ask any further. He knew better than to pry into the secrets of another family after all. So what are you planning to do today? He decided to ask instead. Harry smiled. That was the moment the Morning Post arrived, and with it the next edition of the Quibbler. Hogwarts wouldn't have a peaceful day today. The leaky cauldron was full. The people inside stepped on each other's toe, all of them talking to their neighbors with hushed voices and huge eyes. Tom was standing behind his counter, looking over the crowd, watching. The people were discussing an article in the newspaper heatedly. Not an article in the Daily Prophet. No, an article in the Quibbler. Since Xenophilius Lovegood had come by this morning and had brought his batch of newspapers, the leaky cauldron had been filled with people discussing Oliver Twist and the article he had written this time. The most important word in the discussion? Riddle. Tom could hear it everywhere. Riddle here, riddle there. Yes, the people were discussing Twist's article. Do you think Twist's right and the Ministry wants to slander the boy who lived? Definitive. That's the Ministry for you. They don't want to hear something and so they disgrace whoever told them the truth. It's the same like last time. I bet there was someone telling them about the Death Eaters and their deeds. And did they do anything? No, they just stick their head in the ground and hope whatever is their problem will vanish on its own. And then riddle. On and on the discussion continued. Sometimes people were calling comments to each other through the whole room. Sometimes they would whisper in each other's ears. Tom just snorted when he heard some of the comments. He finally shook his head and decided to read the article again. It was the work of a master. Yes, this article definitively had to be acknowledged by reading it at least a second time. There's a riddle in the world. It's called He Who Must Not Be Named. Facts and fiction about you-know-whos, maybe return to the living. Hogwarts has started again, and with it the typical rumor mill that graces the halls of Hogwarts. Detention Mr. Potter for spreading lies about you-know-who. I just wonder what lies he has spread, because according to those who were present when the detention was given to our famous boy who lived, said boy never stated anything about the return of the darkest Dark Lord since Grindelwald. He was at his Muggle relations' home, I heard one of the fifth years repeating after class. He never mentioned you-know-who neither in the past summer nor in class. And yet he was given detention for spreading lies about the return of you-know-who by the new defense teacher of Hogwarts, Dolores J. Umbridge, the senior undersecretary of Minister Cornelius Fudge himself. And I asked myself, why? The only thing I can think of is that the Ministry wants to break our beloved hero. Just look at it. They slandered a minor over the whole summer, a minor who was at that time living at his Muggle relations, and because of that, unable to renounce the Ministry's claim. Then there was the trial, a trial that was nothing more but a shame to our own laws, and now this. So why? Is it because the Ministry fears he is right? Is it because the Ministry knows he is right and refuses to believe him? Or is the eluded senior undersecretary this time working on her own device? I don't know, and I don't care. What I care about are facts, hard facts that will tell you the truth. So, let's go to the facts. Maybe we'll find out whom to believe and whom to disregard. One of the facts I've already mentioned before. Why using Peter Pettigrew for your claim if you have Sirius Black on the run and everyone knows that Pettigrew is dead? Others I haven't thought about until I decided to enter into this discussion. What happened to Cedric Diggory? We know he died, but did he die in the maze? And if he did, Why was he brought back to the entrance by Harry Potter? Was Potter there when Cedric Diggory died, and if he was, why did Diggory die and not Potter? Let's face it, Diggory was a 7th-year student and one of the brightest minds of our generation. Potter instead might be famous, but at that time he had just been a 14-year-old boy who was more interested in playing Quidditch than learning. So why did Diggory die? Did he rescue Potter and was killed at that time? But if he was, where is the mark of his heroism? There was nothing in the maze that would have him looking as if he was just sleeping. The only thing I know that kills without a trace is the killing curse. And there's the problem. I don't think that there was anything in the maze that would operate with the killing curse. So where did it come from, Potter? You won't tell me that a 14-year-old will be able to perform the killing curse. The reason I don't believe that is simple. In magical lore and theory, from Aldwin Hoppenbecker is stated that a wizard has to at least mature the second time to be able to perform dark spells like the Unforgivables flawlessly. Before that he would be hard-pressed to perform a Curtius or an Imperius, and he would be absolutely unable to perform the killing curse. Normally a wizard matures between the ages of 15 and 18. Harry Potter was neither at that time, and because of that unable to perform the killing curse. So who did it? Sirius Black? So why didn't Potter name him? Who else is there? The only one who ever handed out the killing curse like sweets in the last decades was you-know-who. And if it wasn't you-know-who, it definitely had to be someone just as bad as the infamous Dark Lord. So why doesn't the Ministry investigate? Isn't it the right of Cedric Diggory's parents to know who killed their son? And if it's the deed of someone else, why does the Ministry nothing to catch the killer? Is it their fear that Potter might be right and you-know-who's back? So, in the end I decided to at least take a look into this you-know-who business myself. You know, the simple facts. Who is he? What has he done? Is there a way for him to come back? The questions, as simple as they seemed at first, brought interesting results. We are talking about you-know-who and mean that one dark wizard who had half of Britain under his control just a decade earlier, the wizard who calls himself Lord V. Lord Vythe? It should have been simple to find out anything about a pure-blood lord like that. After all, we have generology books, and books about the lords of the wizarding world and their power. In all those books the family names of said lords are always mentioned, easy to find, enjoyable to read. In the end it came different than I thought. I simply didn't find any reliable data on him. There was nothing about him, nothing to know, nothing that counted as reliable facts. The question I asked myself at that point was why. I pondered some time over the answer of that question until I finally found the answer I was looking for. I couldn't find anything because it was a shock to me, but I have to confess that like maybe a lot of people in the wizarding world, I just truly do not know who he is. Of course I know what he did and how he was seen by the wizarding world, but that knowledge does not tell me Bubby was see who he truly is. It just tells me what he's capable of. Well, there is a way to rectify this, so I started at the beginning. Everybody knows you-know-whose name is Lord V. There are not many lords in this realm, so I just looked them up in my school history book in the chapter about wizarding nobility. Can you imagine how surprised I was when I did not find evidence about any Lord V? There even never was a family V at all. So the first fact I have to tell you is that the man who brought war on us until he was stopped by Harry Potter was a lying coward. I cannot fathom how any respectable pure blood can follow someone who cowardly hides behind a false name, a synonym that means flight from death in French. A coward indeed. My mother's a respectable pure blood of a French lineage. She said she would die before being called V. Being afraid of death is nothing a proper pure blood would ever be. She told me it is against proper pure blood behavior to be afraid of something as natural and as connected to magic like death. I believe my mother, but if that's true, wouldn't that make you-know-who an uneducated mudblood? And I mean a mudblood, because that is what the blood purists call those who don't follow wizarding traditions. Sadly, that's all guesses, and there are no facts to tell me if my mother's right. So I went back to scratch. There is not much known about you-know-who. He is a dark lord. He is cruel. He lies about his name and maybe his lordship, and he is the heir of Slytherin. This information has been whispered everywhere. It's just a rumor itself. But I decided to try. I went to the goblin for this piece of information. Normally, they don't give up sensitive information like that. But there is a simple way. They are required to hand out the Great Book of Wizarding Genealogy, if you ask them. The book is an edited version and does not show all heirs. There are heirs in our world that went into hiding by changing their names. They will not be listed in it. The goblins themselves have another copy where they are truly listed. But I digress. I looked up the lineage of Slytherin. The lineage vanished in 1651, when a daughter of the house most likely killed all the heirs and the Lord of Slytherin. The only remaining known family member was the son of said daughter, a Gaunt. The last one who came to Gringotts to be added to the family was a Tom Marvolo Riddle, son of Mirope Gaunt, back in the 40s or 50s. He was a half-blood, Muggle-raised orphan, and attended Hogwarts in Slytherin. He vanished shortly before the rise of you-know-who. So, let's go back to our facts. Lord Vivi is a liar. He lied about his name, as Vivi has no family name. He even maybe lied about his lordship. Then there was Tom Riddle, the last descendant of Gaunt and maybe Slytherin. The goblins denied him the title of Lord Slytherin, and he never claimed the Gaunt lordship. Tom Riddle never had a child, so there is no way that Lord Vivi is his son. There is also no other known living descendant of Slytherin. So how come that the liar Lord Vivius claims to be a pure-blood Slytherin? So just look at it like that. Even if you know who's back like Albus Dumbledore claims, there is no way that he would gain enough followers to be a threat. After all, I believe in the society I have been raised in, and no pure-blood lord would follow a half-blood who rejects the old name of Gaunt just to spout of a secondary name, even if it's more famous, like Slytherin, whose family first carried a lordship years after the Gaunts. After sorting through all the facts I found, I finally realized that there is no way to decide who you-know-who really is. That leaves me with just one solution. I simply will not call him you-know-who anymore, simply because I don't know who. From now on he will be Riddle to me. Eventually it is his real name, and even if it isn't, he still is a multiple riddle I have not solved until now. After all, I do not know who he is, and I do not know if he lives. So why calling him something that is wrong? Even if he is alive, he cannot fault us for calling him a riddle when he does nothing to rectify our knowledge about him. And a ban on riddle will be a hard thing to add. After all, it's such a common word. Oliver Twist,